My entitled grandmother hijacks my brother's cancer diagnosis and somehow makes the entire situation all about herself, as she constantly pulls the attention away from him in a way that is truly toxic and unsupportive. Here's what happened. Okay, so recently my older brother developed a strange lump in his neck. This had been a month-long ordeal, so I'm going to start at the beginning. Upon receiving this news, my brother's first reaction was just to call my mother and father, allowing them to spread the news if they wanted to. My mom told her mom so they could send him food, clothing, money, etc. Well, my entitled grandma, who is the subject of this story, didn't become aware of this until about a week or so after the initial acknowledgement of the possibility of cancer. And this was mostly because she wasn't going to do anything but pester everybody. She then proceeded to call my brother and yell at him for not telling her first, and how he's so selfish for keeping this diagnosis from her, a nurse. Now, I find this so stupid because she's a CNA, and no insults to CNAs, I mean, you guys are wonderful. And my family is a family of nurses and doctors. I mean, even my brother is going to medical school himself. Not to mention that her being a nurse does not entitle her to know information about something going on with us. We did not want to tell extended family yet because we weren't sure if it was cancerous or something else. We didn't want to create unnecessary worry. Throughout the month, she had been calling and texting him nonstop, and when he didn't respond, she would blow up my phone and my other brother's phone. Now, I don't live with my brother, and admittedly, I don't have much contact with him, so I don't know why she called me 45 times within 2 days. I had to block the numbers so I could get through school without my phone constantly buzzing in my pocket. She finally stopped when my dad stepped in and forced her to stop. Now, at this point, we hadn't heard much from her at the time, but unfortunately, this is where things really go south, as my grandma goes crazy in a way that I honestly never expected. Anyway, so we had to go to where my dad lives so he could have it removed. Insurance problems were the reason we couldn't stay in town, and it was just supposed to be my dad, my mom, and me. And I was mostly there for my mom because I didn't want her to be alone. When we let family know, she decided to call my brother up and demanded that we go to Mayo Rochester for a second opinion. But the thing is, we didn't even have the first opinion. All we knew is that the lump has been taken out. It hasn't even been biopsied yet or even sent to pathology, and she kept insulting the hospital we were going to, and that Rochester was so much closer. But in fact, it's a lot farther. We were going to Bell End, and this made my dad angry because he works at the hospital, and also it's Bell End. My dad then calls her and tells her to shut up. Well, finally we got some silence, and we were hoping that that would be it, but of course it wasn't. The initial trip was going to be a 3.5-day trip. We would leave Tuesday night to the hospital and leave Friday afternoon. It was just going to be the four of us. However, in true fashion that only my grandmother can exude, she decided to butt into the situation once more. She announces on Facebook that she'll be going to her grandbaby surgery to be there for him and that they should pray for her and not him. We were also not aware she was coming until that announcement. A day before we had to leave, we sucked things up and tried to keep things nice and stress-free for my brother. When we arrived, it was smooth at first. The first night we got dinner and discussed plans for the next day. My brother had a CT at 9:15 and then a consult for surgery at 11:30. Afterwards, we were going to wander around the city and enjoy ourselves. The first part of our plans went well. We got up, got breakfast, and then went to the CT appointment. I was originally just going to meet my stepmother there, and we were going to go shopping and get some things for post-surgery. However, my entitled grandma met us at the hospital. At the first appointment, she began to demand to take my mom's spot in the appointment room, saying she had more of a right in that room because she knew more than my mom. And we're talking about my mom, you know, the mother of my brother. My brother then put his foot down before my mom could say anything in return to her, and that shut her up for a little bit. My grandma then pouted in the corner while my brother and my parents went into the appointment with him. The appointment took about an hour or so. My stepmom and I began getting ready to go shopping for a bit, catching up and deciding where to go. My grandma then steps in and demands us to stay or to invite her along, but we just deny, saying that we wanted it to just be us because I haven't seen my stepmom in a while. And then the conversation begins to change for the worse. She began to call me a disappointment for not thinking of my grandma and how I'm such an ungrateful brat. She said she would do anything to spend another moment with her grandmother and that you never know what's gonna happen. She may pass away all of a sudden. And then she started demanding why I didn't defend her and why I blocked her. Now, I'm gonna be honest. After years of mistreatment from this hag and the burnout of high school and the fact that it was 9 in the morning, I was not in a good mood. I replied in a short tone. I said to her, if you pass away right now, I couldn't care less. And then I turned on my heels with my stepmom and I went shopping. After the CT, we decided to go out as a family for a little bit and spend some time together until the next appointment. My grandmother then takes this opportunity to take control. She begins to direct us to places that she wants to go, places she thinks my brother would like, and she keeps asking my brother to buy her things. After all, this situation is just as hard on her as it is on my brother brother. I keep holding my tongue, simply guiding my brother away. My stepmom and I also double team my grandma whenever she starts pestering my brother over the smallest things, like why she wasn't allowed in the appointment. We separate them quickly and end the conversation from the beginning. Finally, it comes to the second appointment and we go. Instead of shopping, I decided to spend the appointment time doing schoolwork since I was missing a few days. Not to mention that I was just so emotionally strained from trying to parent my grandmother. Well, eventually, my entitled grandmother started pestering me again. And this time she was a bit nicer, asking me about school and all this other stuff. I then began talking to her about my plans for my senior year and plans after college. She then began to try and tell me what I should do with my life, saying I should follow in my father's footsteps, I should become a respiratory therapist, or better yet, I should become a CNA like her. But I said no, and that I planned to either become a psychologist or a physical therapist, and that was final. Well, she pouts for a little bit and then starts telling me about classes I should take for my senior year, and that my senior year would be too hard for me. She says that sometimes I'm a bit slow and may not be able to handle calculus and physics at the same time, but I bit my tongue a bit and I just ignored her. But then she got angry at me for ignoring her. I honestly wish I had some witty things to say to her, but all I could muster was, well, this is why no one wants you around. And thankfully, that shut her up for just a little bit. Finally, lunchtime came around and we went out. And this was my brother's choice, of course. But my entitled grandma began to complain about the choice of restaurant and how Cancun was trashy and the food wasn't good. When we arrive, she then begins to try and tell us what to order. Now, we ignore her, of course. However, when she heard that I ordered enchiladas, she began on her wonderful tirade. She began to talk to me about how I should watch my cholesterol and my weight, and she then said, you know, a fat physical therapist is a bad physical therapist. After she said that, I stared her for a little bit before I simply moved seats, essentially leaving her alone at the end of the table. When the waiter comes over to get our orders, she then tries to change my order into a salad, saying that I don't need all of those carbs, but I'm in bulk right now and I want my carbs. My mom stepped in and simply told her to shut up. My entitled grandma was most likely going to protest, but my dad gave her the glare of doom and she finally shut up. She remained quiet and was pouting until it was time to go back to the hotels and get some sleep. My entitled grandma began to pester me again to stay with her at the hotel, but I wasn't going to. I didn't plan on it and I did not want my mom alone. So I set my foot down, saying I wasn't going anywhere with her. She then proceeded to grab my arm and tried to drag me away, saying that I was a brat and should listen to my elders. But I simply pulled my arms out and called her a complete hag that should learn when someone wants her to go away. After that, I went back to the hotel and I went to bed. The next day, we learned that she went home because apparently she knows that she's not wanted, which is honestly really doubtful. She also sent all of us a long string of text messages telling us how she was so disappointed in all of us for not respecting her and just being so mean. She apparently was so stressed out with the possibility of my brother having cancer, and she just wanted to spend this time with her family. But you know what? I just ignored her. The rest of the trip went well, and my brother's surgery went well. Luckily, it was benign, and now he has a wicked scar from surgery. And even to this day, I still have my entitled grandma blocked because she is truly one of the worst people that I've ever known. Man, imagine being so entitled that you go to someone else's cancer diagnosis and somehow make it about yourself. Like seriously, can she not read the room? Now is not the time to be selfish and be like, oh, it's all about me. How dare you not take everything I say as gospel? It's like, lady, you try to take the mom spot in the appointment room and you're trying to like dictate everything about this trip while also insulting everybody around you. Did you really think anybody would want anything to do with you after this? So truly good for you and the rest of your family for shutting this lady down because her behavior was absolutely out of line. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. My roommate has feelings for my boyfriend in a way that is truly trying to like ruin my relationship, and at this point, I don't know what to do. Here's what happened. I'm a 21-year-old college senior living with a few roommates, including someone who we will call Cherry. She's sweet but super socially awkward, and we mostly got along fine. That is, until my boyfriend entered the picture. We are long distance, so he visits every other weekend, and at first, Cherry barely acknowledged him. But then he carried her groceries one time, and then suddenly she was all in. It started off small. She would hang out with us in the living room, ask when he was visiting next, and even seem more upset than me when he couldn't come over for 3 weeks. But then it escalated. She would interrupt our dates, force her way into our plans, and constantly ask him to fix things in her room. One time, I gave him a Nintendo Switch, and she insisted that we play it in the living room instead of my bedroom. Another time, we were cooking a romantic dinner, and she plopped down at the kitchen table to do homework. Now, the worst part about all of this is that she started showing up unannounced at places we mentioned going to. Valentine's Day, for example, was a disaster. She saw me dressed up, threw a dramatic fit about being dumped, and guilt-tripped us into consoling her instead of going out. Oh, and by the way, she's been asking me super personal questions about my relationship, like she's auditioning for a role in it. But here's the real kicker. I overheard her crying on the phone the other day, confessing her love for my boyfriend. She talked about taking photos of him, daydreaming about him, and how unfair it is that ugly girls get happy endings. She even went on a concerning rant about feeling depressed and hinting that she might be having some dark thoughts, if you know what I mean. I'm stuck living with her for 3 more months, and I'm worried her behavior will escalate. How do I shut this down without making things worse? What should I do? Oh man, I absolutely cannot imagine being in that scenario. Here you are just trying to live out your senior days of college, and now your roommate is suddenly jumping in and being like, oh, I love your boyfriend. Ugly girls get the better endings. This is so unfair. If I was in your shoes, I would be like, okay, my boyfriend is never coming over again, and we're gonna ride out these 3 months until I can find a new place to live. Because seriously, what is happening right now? Cherry's behavior is so uncalled for. She's clearly going through some hard times, and she's now latched onto your boyfriend because he showed any semblance of kindness towards her. And that is definitely not fair. That really is something that you do not deserve to deal with. So yeah, hopefully an information diet or even keeping your boyfriend away from her from now on will take this idea out of her head where she's like, oh yeah, maybe I have a chance with him. Because this situation really sucks and you don't deserve this in the slightest. Am I the jerk for taking a job that my friend was fired from? Because right now they are very pissed off at me, saying that I'm making a massive mistake. And at this point, I don't know what to do. Here's what happened. Okay, so I lost my job last month and applied for a manager position at a local coffee shop. It pays well, is super close to my house, which is essential since I don't drive, and it's a leadership role. So overall, a great opportunity for me. Well, the only issue is that my friend used to work there and was fired about a year ago. She told me not to take the job, saying it would destroy my mental health and that I would definitely get fired as well. But here's the thing. I used to work with this friend at another store where we met, and she was an awful employee. She had a bad attitude, she was rude to staff, she thought she was better than everyone, and she lacked basic skills. And this is also the 3rd job she's been fired from. Our friendship is honestly really toxic. I've tried to distance myself multiple times, but she love bombs me, and I'm an autistic people pleaser, so somehow I'm now the maid of honor at her upcoming wedding. But that's an entirely different thread altogether. I've been at this job for a week now, and I love it. The team is great, super supportive, and the location is ridiculously convenient. I'm someone who gets along with people and does my job efficiently, so I don't usually have work conflicts unlike my friend. At this point, she's now mad at me for taking the job and keeps saying that I made a mistake. So truly, am I the jerk for ignoring her warnings and taking the job anyways? Because right now, I'm not sure if I made a mistake. No, you didn't do anything wrong, and I don't think you're the jerk, because it just sounds like your friend is super salty because they got fired and you're somehow thriving even though it's only a weekend. Think about it for a second. Why would you ever take the advice of someone who got fired from a job when they themselves, like you already know, are probably not a good employee in the first place? So of course they're gonna have a bad opinion about a place they left. And by the way, they left because they got fired. And this is not the first time they got fired. This is not someone who knows what they're talking about. So no, you're not the jerk for taking the job because they have literally not worked there for over a year. The entire staffing situation could have changed between now and then. And in my opinion, I would say stick with a job and forget whatever your friend has to say, because clearly they have a jaded opinion about that entire establishment. Am I the jerk for not cleaning the kitchen, despite the fact that my partner agreed to help out with chores and is also working late, which is preventing him from doing his share? Because right now, I'm not sure what to do. Here's what happened. So my partner and I live together in a home that I recently purchased last year. I put all of my savings into the home and pay 100% of the mortgage every month. We split bills 50-50, including groceries, and my partner is in the process of gaining permanent residency. It's a complicated family situation, but essentially his entire family is here, but he is not a citizen. He's also started within the past year of his own commercial flooring business, and he doesn't get enough jobs to sustain his income full-time with his business. So he often does random labor subcontracting work, but as a result, I make a bit more money than him. Anyways, given all of this, I decided I wouldn't charge him any rent, since the house is in my name anyways. But the one agreement that we had was that he would help me out with any household chores. We are both trying to save money, so we try to eat out as little as possible. Every night I come home from work and I cook a nice dinner, and he stacks the dishwasher and washes the pots and chopping boards that can't go into the dishwasher, and I feel like this is an even share in workload. But recently, over the past couple of weeks, he's been coming home pretty late, like around 9 o'clock p.m. I still cook dinner for him and and I wait for him to come, but this week he's told me he's too exhausted to clean, which is fair enough. But the issue is that I don't want to have to come home from my job, spend an hour cleaning the kitchen, and then another hour cooking. I need time after work to debrief and relax. So today I called him and I told him I was just gonna get takeaway for dinner. He then got really awful towards me and made a comment about how we were supposed to be saving money. But I told him that I was tired and I couldn't clean and then cook and then clean again. He was kind of like, well, I'm working late, why can't you just do it? And I don't know, maybe I should have been more polite and just clean the kitchen when he's working late, but it kind of bugs me because he's choosing to work late. I've told him time and time again to just get a full-time job so he's not constantly stressed about finding work for his business and doing subcontracting work that runs late. But he told me he doesn't want to kiss anyone's butt and that he works well under his own direction. But in my opinion, that's life. I work under authority at my job and I deal with it in exchange for a consistent paycheck. Also, I don't think it's fair that I'm sacrificing my time so that he gets to earn more money for himself. So seriously, am I the jerk in this situation? Because right now I don't know what to do. I don't think you're the jerk because honestly, he really needs to step up when it comes to cleaning. I totally understand that he's working late, but at the end of the day, that really has to be something he needs to step up on. Because right now, in my opinion, I kind of think he's being selfish. Am I the jerk for refusing to pay for my nephew's college tuition, even though I paid for my cousin's dog's medical fees? Because right now, my brother and his wife are bad-mouthing me to the entire family, and at this point, I seriously don't know what to do. Here's what happened. Okay, so my cousin's dog got really sick, and the cost to treat her is very, very expensive. I love dogs, and I love her dog in particular, and I love her, so I paid for it for her in full. But now, my brother and his wife want me to help them pay for my nephew's college fund. I could help pay for it easily, but I refused. I don't like my nephew. I don't like his mom, and I'm indifferent towards my brother. We don't have the closest relationship, but at least we are cordial. Plus, it's not like they can't afford it. They go on multiple overseas trips a year, but if they pay for it themselves, they won't be able to afford other things, like their shopping sprees of brand name bags. They'll have to downgrade their life a little, and they're not happy about it. But to me, it's just a normal part of life. Like, people save all the time for college, even if it means they can't afford to go to Disney this year. They think it's unfair because my cousin could have afforded her dog's treatment all on her own easily. She is in a better financial state than them, but apparently they can't afford their son's college fees easily. They are now bad-mouthing me to everyone, claiming that I'm favoring a dog over my nephew, which is, and I'm not gonna lie, sort of true. They think I'm out of touch because I don't think it's a big deal for them to not go on multiple luxury vacations a year just to afford their son's tuition. They think that because it's my brother and blood family, I need to help them out, especially since they think it's easy for me to do. So seriously, am I the jerk for refusing to help pay for my nephew's college, even though I totally could? Because right now I'm incredibly frustrated and I don't know what to do. No, you're not the jerk at all. This honestly is so weird. Your brother and his wife are clearly spending their money wrong, and they saw that you spent money on your cousin, so they're like, oh yeah, you can pay for our son's college. And it's like, hold on, wait a second, why did you get sucked into all of this? Just because you paid for medical fees for a dog doesn't suddenly mean that you're open to paying for everybody else's problems in the family. I mean, never mind the fact that your brother and his wife are like financially irresponsible. They're doing all these trips and buying all these things, and yet they're trying to be like, oh, can you pay for the college? And it's like, no, are you kidding me right now? Why would I pay for something that you guys can obviously do yourself, but instead you're choosing to spend all that money on stuff that you don't need? Like, this legitimately sounds like a them problem and not a you problem. And you know what? If they want to badmouth you, then you can turn that right back on them and be like, okay, well, why don't you pay for stuff for your son? Why are you, a relative, somehow responsible for this kid's education? Shouldn't that fall on the mom and dad? Like, are you kidding me right now? So no, you're not the jerk in this scenario, and the fact that they're trying to guilt trip you is incredibly weird. And I know if I was in your shoes, I would not put up with that for a single second. Am I the jerk for being frustrated that my sister-in-law is overstaying her welcome and my husband won't enforce any kind of boundary? Because right now I'm very frustrated and I don't know what to do. Okay, so my 18-year-old sister-in-law is on spring break and staying with me and my husband. We share an apartment with my brother-in-law, but my husband, my brother-in-law, and myself all split the rent equally. It's not owned by my brother-in-law. Before my brother-in-law left for work, my husband asked if his sister could stay, and I suggested a compromise. She would stay half the week and then we would take her home. And you know what? He agreed to do this. When the time came, my husband told her and she just laughed it off. Later, when I wasn't around, she convinced him to let her stay. Now, what was his excuse, you might be wondering? He said to me that his brother said that she could stay the whole week. But here's the thing, my brother-in-law isn't even here. We are the ones dealing with it. She takes up space, invites herself on our date nights, and I can't even fully relax in my own home. Now, this isn't new. 2 months before before college, she basically moved in without me knowing until days before. And you know what? I was extremely accommodating. I included her in everything and even planned her birthday. When she finally moved to her dorm, my husband and I agreed that we wouldn't pick her up for the first week to get some alone time. She then called crying with her mom, and they convinced him to pick her up. My husband excused it by saying, "Oh, she's just homesick." But my issue is that she'll never actually fit into college life if she keeps running back here. When I was in college, I stayed in my dorm, hung out with my friends, and partied, and she's not even trying to adjust. Later, I had a direct conversation with her, making it clear my issue wasn't her visiting, just that I needed alone time. She promised I could always tell her when I did not want her over, but weeks later, when I told her no for a weekend, my husband backed me up and told her no. She then got my brother-in-law to pick her up instead. When she arrived, she said hello to everyone except for me and ignored me until I said hello first. Then she stood right next to me and started speaking in Spanish about something directly related to me. Now, with this situation, my husband admitted that he didn't want to push back because my brother-in-law can be difficult sometimes. He said that if we sent my sister-in-law home, my brother-in-law would make a big deal about how he can have whoever he wants in his room since he pays rent. And if we tried to enforce limits, my brother-in-law would reiterate by saying he'll only pay rent for the time he's actually here. I told my husband I won't be around them the rest of the week because I'm too irritated. I don't want to be rude, but I feel disrespected and very frustrated. So, am I the jerk for wanting my sister-in-law to leave after the agreed upon time and stepping back since my husband won't set boundaries? Because right now, I seriously don't know what to do. Oh man, not only are you not the jerk, but also I would highly consider moving out. It's obvious that your husband is not going to be on your side, and if anything, he's always going to appeal to his brother, his sister, and his mom. And that really is not fair for you because you have to deal with all of this garbage and it's all at your expense. So yeah, in my opinion, I think moving out might be the best option because I know if I was in your shoes, that's the first thing I would even think of doing before ever approaching anyone ever again. An entitled Karen claims that I'm being racist and that I'm intentionally misguiding her in the store that I work at. She even went as far as to complain to my manager, essentially trying to get me fired. And I'm honestly so annoyed and incredibly baffled. Here's what happened. So to start things out, I had been working for about 4 hours, and by this point, it wasn't too crazy at work. But everything changed when this entitled Karen showed up. She seemed pretty nice, because admittedly, for the most part, she was being nice to me. She was saying that she couldn't find what she was looking for after walking by it a million times. She asked me where I could find the gift cards, and I say while pointing it out to her that the gift cards are on the stand right over there by the checkout. You can ask my coworker who's running the checkout to show you what you need. The Karen then thanks me and goes off on her way. Since I didn't have any customers at the lumber side of my department, I decided to watch this entitled Karen and see her walk right by the stand, all the way down to the service desk, and ask them where the gift cards were. I sighed deeply because she's not the first customer to do this, and this Karen is now walking back because I'm sure that the service desk has told her that it's next to checkout. But even then, this entitled Karen walks back to me and says, "I couldn't find the gift cards." So I told her, "Oh, you just went a little too far. I said it's right next to checkout." She then says, "Oh, well, I just asked them and they said they didn't have any there." And at this point, I'm super baffled. I said, "No, that was not the checkout. That was the service desk. I'll point out the actual checkout and then you can go for it." Again, I point straight to it, even stood in the spot where if you walk straight, you'd walk right into it. And yet again, this entitled Karen managed to walk straight past it and up to the service desk again before coming back to me and asking me again why I'm misguiding her. At this point, I'm getting frustrated as well as baffled by her inability to not turn and look at the stand I'm clearly pointing at, but instead just repeatedly strolling past it. This time, I point at the checkout sign and then the gift card stand. This entitled Karen then says to me, "I'm getting tired of walking from one end of the store and back. Can't you just go get it for me?" I say to her, "Ma'am, I'm not allowed to leave my register unattended, and I've been pointing out where the gift cards are the entire time, but you kept repeatedly walking by it instead." She then gets incredibly upset and walked off again, mumbling, claiming that I was being racist to her, and that's why I'm apparently trying to make a fool of her. And when she said that, I honestly was blown away and could have never predicted what she would do next. Yet again, this entitled Karen walks right by the stand and goes up to the service desk. She spins around now, clearly mad, and back in my direction, fuming again at the fact that she can't find the gift cards. I am now just super annoyed, and I quickly call Sally, my supervisor, who's running the checkout. She picked up when she saw me waving urgently at her from my register. When she picks up the phone, I say, "Quickly, stop that lady customer. She's looking for for gift cards and she's been walking right by it for several minutes now. Luckily, Sally saw the Karen and stopped to show this lady the gift cards, which Karen bought a handful and paid for. All the while, she said something to Sally while glaring daggers at me, as if I had just kicked her puppy. Sally comes over to me and asked why I kept sending Karen to the service desk instead of where the gift cards were. I rolled my eyes, very annoyed, and I said, I did tell her. I pointed out where the gift card stand was to this Karen many times, but she kept walking by it and just kept going to the service desk instead of stopping to ask for help. I even tried to suggest that I call you so you can help her when she gets to checkout, but she kept saying, oh, it's fine, I could do it myself, and would just repeatedly walk by it. My manager then says something that absolutely blew my mind. She says that this lady claims that I had sworn at her and that I didn't want to help her because of her skin color, which is honestly really stupid. I told her I never said that. All I said was that I'm not allowed to leave my register unattended, but this lady kept walking by before I could say, but I can call Sally to point out where the gift cards are. And you know what? If you don't believe me, you can check the cameras. Thankfully, Sally said she did believe me, and she was also on my side, saying, you know what can we do when customers don't pay attention? No matter how much we point things out to them, they'll just walk by it and claim we lied to them. Luckily, the rest of my shift was uneventful and I was able to leave on time, but I honestly hope I never have to deal with that weird entitled Karen ever again. Some people are just absolutely stupid. The fact that this lady would not only walk by the gift card section repeatedly, and the fact that she doesn't know how to follow simple instructions is completely eclipsed by the fact that she tried to claim that this person was being racist towards her, when in reality, that's not at all what happened. She's just too dumb to find the gift cards. And I mean, honestly, how do you not know how to find the gift cards? I bet you she went up to that service desk and they said the exact same thing. Oh, they're just by the checkout counter. Like literally go over there and you'll get what you need. But instead, she tries to pull this arbitrary race card, as if that has anything to do with the conversation. But there's probably no helping people who act like this, because it's super inappropriate to make this kind of outlandish accusation against somebody, all because this stupid entitled Karen is too ignorant to follow even the simplest of instructions. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. My boyfriend called me abusive, but then backed down and said it was just an exaggeration, and now I just can't stop worrying about it. Before I start, I want to say that I've already booked back in with a psychologist, and will be unpacking this thoroughly with her too. I'm taking this very seriously. I also want to preface all of this with the fact that my boyfriend is wonderful. We have been together for 6 years, and they have been a joyful 6 years. To put it simply, I love him, and I feel supported and loved by him. That said, he definitely puts his foot in his mouth sometimes. I really hope that all that's happened here is another foot in the mouth moment. For the sake of privacy, I will call him William. The final piece of important context is that I have PTSD from a previous relationship. I am a lot healthier now than I was when I was first diagnosed, but I can still easily feel backed into a corner and have to work hard not to lash out from there, because I believe that trauma is not an excuse for abusive behavior. So if I am engaging in abusive behavior, I need to nip it in the bud, or I need to be single until I am healthy enough to be in a relationship. William knows about the PTSD and some specific details of my trauma, but the further we got into our relationship, the more careful I have been with trauma dumping. I want a partner, not a therapist, and I don't want him to have vicarious trauma. I have had to learn to temper how I speak with people so I don't come across as aggressive. When I'm in distress, I tend to use very strong rhetoric, and I can definitely see how people might feel steamrolled into accepting my point of view. William has always been very rational in these situations, calmly stating where I am relying on fallacies and helping me to define what is really going on so that we can talk it through properly. I already sometimes worry about the emotional labor involved for him there, but whenever I have checked with him before, he has just said that he enjoys that we can communicate so fluently. We were talking about this again recently in the car, and I remember saying that I really appreciated that he could go toe-to-toe with me verbally without letting me get away with outlandish claims. He brought up a specific event where he says I was trying really hard to start a fight, and he didn't want to fight at all. I remember the event, but I don't remember what we were discussing. I do remember feeling at the time like I wasn't trying to fight, but rather be understood. He said that it bordered on emotional abuse, and everything inside me just kind of went numb. I was the one behind the wheel, so I forced myself to focus on the road and asked him what he meant. He said that I pick his most vulnerable areas, and I tried to fight. I asked him for an example, and he brought up a recent recent disagreement that we have been having about our most common reoccurring issues. His tendency to tell me how hot our female friends are, and my tendency to find that upsetting. For example, he will talk about people's butts or thighs, or how pretty they are, and has often told me he is infatuated with someone, but he won't compliment me because he can't objectify people to their faces. Stuff along those lines. I have since asked if my expressing that I am hurt by his infatuations is what he means by picking at his most vulnerable areas, and he said he didn't have any other examples. This left me to wonder if by picking at his most vulnerable areas, he means pointing out things that have hurt me, and thus causing him to feel guilt. But it is also very possible that it's more about how I point things out. We arrived at his house and I took myself to the bathroom because I was having a panic attack, and I was so worried that it's manipulative to visibly dissolve into a panic attack when accused of abuse. So I stayed in there until I grounded myself, and I came out and tried to talk it through with him, but I ended up sobbing hysterically, and I'm honestly really ashamed of this. And that's when he backtracked and said he didn't mean abusive, he meant domineering, and I got worried that he backtracked because he was scared of me crying. I asked him to go see a psychologist to get external advice on whether our relationship is unhealthy for him. He said no to therapy, but agreed to have a deep talk with his best friend, who knows us both really well. I then asked him if I make him feel small or if he's afraid of me, to which he said no. I also asked him if he gets nauseous when he thinks about coming to see me, or if he changes his activities because he's worried that it will upset me, and to both of those he said no. I have never directly insulted or belittled William. It wouldn't occur to me to do so, but I have said certain things that could definitely be hurtful, and maybe that's making him feel disgusting and small, or even isolated. I would feel disgusted if someone said some of the things that I've said to him, and I don't want him to feel disgusted. I love him, and I'm horrified by the idea that I could be hurting him. I'm even more horrified by the idea that I could be an abuser. We have since talked about it again, and he promised he didn't backtrack out of fear, but out of having not originally realized what the word abuse meant to me. I said that I was willing to go to therapy to work on being the healthiest version of myself, and to trust him to choose for himself whether our relationship was healthy for him or not. I also said I would work on expressing my distress less emotively, and that I was taking it very seriously. So am I abusive in this situation? What should I do? This is a really sticky situation, and I think it's really good to hear that you're going to a psychologist to try and work this out, because honestly, I think that really is your best bet. There's a lot going on here between you and your boyfriend, and there's a lot of nuance that you definitely need to figure out with a psychologist. So hopefully that goes well, and I think talking to them and discussing these issues, especially with the fact that you've struggled with PTSD of having to deal with an abusive relationship before, definitely is something that a professional should hear about. And hopefully in the end, things can work out between you and your boyfriend, because you two obviously love each other. So I really hope that all of this works out. I moved 500 miles to be with my boyfriend, only to now end up feeling like his mom, and I honestly don't know what to do. I'm a 30-year-old female and my boyfriend is 27. We spent the first half of our relationship long distance, living in different states on the other side of the country. I agreed that if I found a job in my field, I'd move to his state. So now we have been living together for about 2 months. For me, it's a new city, a new state, a new job, it's a new everything. My job is incredibly demanding. I'm the supervisor of an entire department, and I manage 9 employees with little to no support from upper management. I am mentally and emotionally exhausted by the end of the day. My boyfriend, in contrast, works from home, and I do know that he works hard. However, he'll admit he has a lot of downtime during the day. He also makes more money than me. My issue is that I feel like his mom now that we live together. I do all the cleaning, all the grocery shopping, all of the cooking. When something is broken, I'm the one who calls the apartment maintenance. Basically, I manage our household. Coming home after a long day to a sink full of dishes, or socks on the floor, the toilet seat up, it all just drives me crazy. I have asked for more initiative, and his response is that he just doesn't think about those things, and that I need to ask him. At first, this seemed fair, but now it's like one more thing on my list each day. I shouldn't have to ask him to help keep our home clean. If the toilet is dirty, then scrub it. Or if the dishwasher is full, then empty it. I almost feel like I was disillusioned by the long distance, and now reality is hitting me hard. I know some of my bitterness is unfair, but it's hard when I have to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and go to a job that's emotionally and mentally draining, while he's rolling out of bed 5 minutes before a meeting because he played video games until 2 in the morning. Part of me just wants to go back home, but it's been 3 months. I'm just exhausted and missing my family, friends, and my old life. And honestly, at this point, I'm not sure what to do anymore. Your boyfriend is being incredibly lazy. The fact that he says that you need to ask him in order for him to do anything around the house is incredibly unfair, and that's not how this should work. He needs to be an active participant in keeping this house clean. It's ridiculous. This is just not fair for you. And you said it best. You get up at 5 in the morning every day. If anything, the fact that he works from home should mean that he should be the first person to take care of stuff. The sink, the dishes, the toilet, the laundry, all of that. He should be the first one taking care of that. You're busy enough as it is. So in my opinion, it's time to set some very clear boundaries. Tell him straight up that he needs to start doing more around the house, that you are absolutely exhausted by the end of the day, and he needs to contribute more. And it's not like you don't do enough as it is. I'm sure based on what you've described, you're already doing a lot of the chores around the house, but it sounds like he's doing nothing, and that's not fair for you in the slightest. So hopefully this works out between the two of you, because you moved pretty far just to be with this guy, and it really would be a shame if this is the reason that you end up moving back home. My mom got my Karen of a teacher demoted after she spent the entire year bullying me, all because I was bad at math. So this happened back in 2009. I was a sophomore in high school, and this was about a year before my autism diagnosis. So I have a math disability, and it affects my ability to do things with numbers. Ever since the 7th grade, I had been put into a special ed math class, since my math skills were not good enough for the regular classes. Freshman year, we had a really good math teacher, and by sophomore year, we ended up with a new teacher. She was the cheerleading coach at my local high school. Now, I was a good kid in class. I didn't talk when the teacher was talking, I didn't cause any distractions, I was honest, and never used my phone during class. I was the kind of kid that teachers probably really appreciated. Anyway, she was nice to everybody else, but for some reason, she decided that I was the one she was going to pick on. Over the course of 2 semesters, she would yell at me pretty much once every day, called me a liar on several occasions when I was being truthful. She would call her previous class her dud class, and when I told one of my other teachers about this by the name of Miss Mary, they tried to get me to work things out with this teacher. But this crazy teacher literally said I was mistaken and called me a liar and manipulated me into saying I was mistaken about her doing anything to me, then just walked out. After that, Miss Mary said to me, "She just manipulated you, didn't she?" And I would say yes, that's exactly what she did. One day when I was in class with this psycho teacher, I had a question about how to do a problem, so I raised my hand and asked how to do it. This teacher said, "That problem is so easy, even a monkey could do it." So my mom had been writing everything I said about this lady down, and at the end of the year, my mom went to the sophomore principal and basically complained to them. It is important to note that the sophomore principal that year was African American. And yes, in my school there was a principal for each grade. So my mom said to him, "I want to talk to you about my kid's special ed teacher." Now my daughter has had a number of special education teachers in her life, and none of her teachers have spoken to her the way this teacher does to her. My mom then started reading what my teacher said to me, stating that this problem is so easy that even a monkey could do it. And once the principal heard this comment that the teacher made, his eyes widened. My mom said, "My daughter will not be having her next year." And the principal said, "You're right. Your daughter will not be having her next year. There's no way that's happening." After that, this psycho teacher was demoted to only assisting in classes. And honestly, considering how she treated me, that's probably for the best. I'm honestly surprised that this lady still has a job. I mean, talking to a student who's already in special education because of some disability that's holding them back is so unbelievably rancid. This lady definitely does not deserve to be a teacher in my opinion. And it's also worth noting, despite whatever stereotypes you want to go with, I honestly don't think I've ever seen a cheerleading coach being shown in a good light personally. Maybe that's just me, but I've read a lot of these stories, and there is that common denominator that they are just not very nice people. And I'm sure that's not the case across the board. It's just unfortunate when the majority really does ruin the bunch. When it comes to the original poster and the way they were treated, this is honestly so disgusting and just unacceptable. I mean, they're literally just trying to figure out how to do math. They have a disability where they just can't figure math out, and it's not their fault. They're not choosing to be bad at math. So the fact that this teacher is just deciding, you know what, I'm gonna pick on you specifically, as well as yelling and embarrassing this person over and over again, in my opinion, proves that this lady needs a career change. Because yes, kids suck, but when there's kids who actually have a need, and instead of meeting those needs, you decide to bully them and belittle them for an entire year, you as the education professional deserve to be fired in my opinion, because that's unacceptable and you really should not treat people like that. Today I messed up by breaking down in an interview interview because I was worried about my girlfriend's health, and I honestly feel really embarrassed. So the stress began last night when I was at the gym with my girlfriend, and she came over to me telling me her left arm was going numb. I then suggested that we leave immediately and figure that out as soon as possible. The numbness spread up her arm till half her body on her left side was numb. Her tongue was numb on one side, and her vision started to get zigzaggy in her left eye. We called her mom, who has migraines, and said that they were similar to her symptoms. So we went to my close by apartment to see what we could do to make her feel better. Mind you, it's really late at night at this point. Once we got to my apartment, her numbness was mostly gone, but the headache was beginning. Over the next 3 hours, her pain increased significantly, and it sat like that for over 40 minutes. I could only watch, try to research, get her ice packs and warm towels, and hold her hair while she puked from the pure pain she was feeling. And this was happening the entire evening. It was truly indescribable to watch and feel so powerless. I did my best. My roommate thankfully went and got Excedrin, which she had to try multiple times to get down, but eventually her pain went down to about a 2 out of 10, instead of the 7 out of 10 and higher that she's been experiencing. For the last week, she has been getting faint when standing up and feeling some pressure in her sinuses, which is really concerning. But this morning, she just had a faint headache and lack of appetite after such an ordeal. So after staying up most of the night, I have to go do an online Teams interview with a potential internship for the summer. Most of the questions are going fairly well, and I can answer them proficiently until the math part. The stress just made my mind go blank, and I couldn't think. They eventually, after what felt like 5 minutes of silence, just told me the answer and we moved on. Embarrassed, I looked down at my phone on the table, and I saw a new message from my girlfriend. She said that she just talked to the doctor, and they are having her go to the ER for a brain scan. And I also saw that there were 2 missed calls. So I start to mentally freak out and excuse myself for a minute so I can call her back. She says they think she may have a brain bleed or something serious and needs to get immediate attention. So at this point, I sit back down in front of my camera, visibly red from holding back my crying, and I just can't stop it. I just start falling apart on camera in front of 3 people at the Department of Natural Resources, and I tell them she's in the hospital and might have a brain bleed. They let me off nicely, saying, "You seem like a good guy and certainly know a lot, and we hope everything works out, but you should go be with her." Essentially, they ended the interview with me crying from stress and anxiety. We are at the ER now, and she's chillin'. She feels mostly fine, so they are just doing precautionary stuff at the moment. Hopefully the brain scans will be good, and now we just have to wait and see. Thankfully, I don't think I'll ever have an interview go this poorly ever again. They were pretty good sports about it after all. What a stressful situation to be stuck in. You're in the middle of an interview and your girlfriend has to go to the hospital just to try and get a brain scan to make sure she's okay. That really is scary overall, but at least it worked out. And honestly, I would really try to work at that company. They were really cool about you stepping aside and saying, "Hey, I need to take care of my girlfriend right now. This is really stressed out." They also saw you at a moment where, yeah, this is what makes me break. Not the workload I could get, but my girlfriend being in danger. And if anything, hopefully it does work out for a good job. So hopefully your girlfriend got better and everything's okay. Because in the grand scheme of things, the interview's not that big of a deal. It's honestly so inconsequential. The most important thing there was your girlfriend. And when it counted, you stepped up and were there for her. And that is way more important than anything else that could possibly be going on. An entitled Karen freaks out on a veteran of war in the middle of a supermarket, all because he wouldn't let her stupid kid play with his service dog. And this Karen's entitlement is absolutely baffling. Here's what happened. So this incident occurred yesterday at the grocery store while my partner was shopping. This is actually a challenging task for him. He doesn't like all the aisles and all the people in the stores, and he doesn't like that he feels distracted from paying attention to his surroundings by needing to concentrate on the list of items that he needs. Because he is hard of hearing, he also can't easily hear where people are, and this is hard for him. Also, it's worth noting that he has extra trouble hearing high-pitched sounds, like kids or women's voices. During the COVID lockdown, he lost a lot of progress that he made with his anxiety, but he's working on getting back to where he was. He has a service dog now, which has helped him immensely, not just in public. He sleeps better now, and the dog will alert him when he is becoming anxious based on his behaviors and can help him calm down. It's really incredible. The dog has a vest, and if you read it, you would see that it has a patch that says PTSD service dog, do not distract. Another patch says hard of hearing handler. His dog is trained to guard him from people and to alert him what side he's being approached from. This is not aggressive. The dog just uses its body to block him off and touches his leg while doing it so he knows someone is there. So he turns and saw this little kid looking up at him. He just told her the dog is working and she cannot pet him, on the assumption that she had just asked him that. In response, the kid just holds out her hand for the dog to sniff and said, "Mommy says I can if I say hello first," or something along those lines. The dog doesn't react much at all, so the kid just starts hugging him. At this point, my partner stepped abruptly away from her and told her she needs to stop and to go find her parent. Now, he couldn't tell if the kid was old enough to read, but he's not really mad at the kid because a parent should be responsible for her in a store. And while I'm sure he was probably very stern with her, since he's not very great with people, especially kids, even on a good day, he's also not someone who yells. Yet, lo and behold, the child's mother appears and is apparently telling him off to not yell at a little girl, and that apparently he made her cry, as well as a bunch of other garbage. He is only catching about 30% of what she is saying. He told her he has a service dog, and she needs to keep a better handle on her kid, literally pointing and saying, "Just read the vest." The lady then rolls her eyes at him and continued to berate him. The entire time, he was just standing there largely ignoring her, thinking that if she just says whatever she wants to say, she'll go and leave him alone. But then this entitled Karen did something absolutely unexpected and so unbelievably rude. We are still baffled that she actually did this. She brings up her hand and snaps in my partner's face and asked him, "Are you stupid or something?" Thankfully, there was a couple shopping who must have overheard all that was going on. The woman from this couple came and moved that woman out of my partner's face and looked like she was chewing her out until the Karen left the aisle. The man from the couple asked my partner if he was all right, and he turned out to be a veteran too. And after this experience, I'm honestly still so livid about it, and we really hope that something like this doesn't happen again. What a horrible entitled Karen. Not only are you neglectful of your child, you also encourage your kid to go up to a strange dog that you don't even know. Like literally that dog could have bit that kid and something really terrible could have happened. But instead you just let it happen. I mean, how awful are you? And that doesn't even address the giant elephant in the room, and that's how this entitled Karen treated this veteran. I mean, this is so unbelievably gross. She snapped her hand in this guy's face, screaming at him because he's trying to get her stupid kid away from his dog. I mean, all around just absolutely disgusting. Thankfully, there were some good Samaritans right around the corner, ready to mitigate the situation. It's also really unfortunate because I've read many stories at this point of people just disrespecting service dogs, as well as the people who have them. It's honestly just so disturbing to me. Like, why can't you just leave these people alone? They're just trying to live their lives like anybody else. And leave the dog alone. That dog is working. Leave it alone. When will these people learn? Like, it's so infuriating. So hopefully, for the sake of the original poster, they never have to deal with anything like this ever again, because the way they got treated was completely unfair. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. My boyfriend wants me to move across the country with him, and now my mom is freaking out and everyone is mad at me, and now I don't know what to do. My boyfriend and I have been together and serious for about 1 year. My family was apprehensive about me dating him at first, but they were eventually fine with it and seemed to like him, or just didn't tell me they didn't like him. I moved out of my parents' house a couple of weeks ago, and I officially moved in with my boyfriend. I know my mother wasn't big on me moving out, but didn't say much to me. He got a job offer across the country. He is a professor, but he was never my professor, if that makes sense. We haven't definitively decided on anything yet. He hasn't decided to take the job, but is probably going to, and wants me to come with him. And honestly, we are both leaning towards doing it. It is about a 24-hour car ride, and closer to some of his family. I talked to my brother and sister about it casually, but neither of them had much of an opinion about it. I'm not sure who told my mom. They both deny it, but she called me crying yesterday when she found out the news. She told me it would end badly, and told me not to go, and that I should actually break up with him. She said a bunch of terrible things about him. I tried to get her to calm down and ask what she was talking about. She told me this was a bad idea and a bad relationship. She told me if I do move, then I can't move back in with her, which is honestly fine. This phone call upset me, and I just told her I would talk to her later. I told my boyfriend about this, and he got really upset. He, like me, think family being on the fence about relationships in the beginning was pretty understandable, but I think by this point, he has definitely proven himself to an extent. My boyfriend's attitude now is basically saying, screw my family. He is getting upset with me for being passive-aggressive aggressive for talking and texting anyone in my family, even though it is really just my mom that's texting me. I don't really understand what the big deal is either. If it does end badly, I can always come back. I don't understand what they are so worried about. He loves me a lot. I'm not angry at my mother. I just don't like the situation. I want to be understanding with my family, but at the same time, my boyfriend is my priority. I don't know what the right amount of sticking up for my boyfriend would look like without disowning my family. My brother and sister's advice is that I should just do it, and that she will eventually just get over it. My dad fully supports my mom and agrees with her. Now at this point, everybody's upset with me, and I don't know what the right thing is to do in this situation. What should I do? In my opinion, there are a few red flags here that I just spotted. For one, your boyfriend's getting upset about you texting your family, and he's basically saying, oh, well, screw your family. Also, another red flag here, the boyfriend in this story is 31 years old, and the girlfriend is 22 years old. That is a big age difference in my opinion, and it seems like that's probably what your parents are worried about. Not only are you dating somebody significantly older than you, but you're also about to move across the country with them. And sure, you said it best. You do love your boyfriend, and you really do appreciate him, and your priority is him, which is great. That's exactly how it should be. But exercising some caution and really weighing your options would not be a bad idea in this situation. At the end of the day, it's up to you what you want to do, and not your mom, your dad, or anybody else in your family is going to make that decision for you. And on that note, it's really terrible that your mom would basically give you an ultimatum. She's basically saying if you move out there, you can never come back, which is not fair for you in the slightest. You would think that if things went belly up, she would at least be there for you and say, of course you can come back. So if you do decide to go, just know that this probably will create some kind of rift between you and your family. And I think either way, you just need to be ready for that. My boyfriend has been secretly spending $10,000 on a video game on his phone, and I'm blown away and I don't know what to do. So I've been with my boyfriend for nearly 9 months now, and just last week, I found a bunch of scandalous anime apps, if you know what I mean, on his phone while he was scrolling. I asked him about this, and he immediately attempted to delete the apps, but I stopped him and asked him to explain to me what they were. He said that they were games, and he spent money on them. I asked him how much money exactly, and he told me about $3,000. I then wanted to see his payment history on his Gmail account, and there I saw he had actually spent well over $12,000 over the course of 3 years, most of which was spent this year while he was with me. Last month alone, he nearly spent $700, and he only earns about $2,500 a month. Plus, he pays rent, which is about $800 a month. He admitted that in these games, he was married to a virtual anime character, and he dressed them in very scandalous clothing. Look, I've never understood the whole anime thing. It's not really my thing. But what upsets me in this situation is the financial side of things. I cannot understand for the life of me why anyone would spend this much on games, especially virtual clothes for cartoon characters. He can't even save for a loan on a car or a house that he keeps saying he wants in the near future. I sat him down with his mother and we talked about this in great detail. Apparently his mother had confronted him about his spending problem a year ago, and this was well before we even met. So this is proof that he hasn't changed at all. He admitted to having a spending problem and will be seeking help, a psychologist of some kind, just to try and understand why he's doing this and how to stop. This has made me second guess our relationship and his ability to save for things in the future. I know we've only been together for a short time, but it's things like this that can ruin something really great. Aside from his spending problem, he is genuinely a fantastic guy who treats me wonderfully. Is it worth the effort at this point? If his mother already had this problem with him before we met, and we are having this same issue now, is he actually ever going to change? Should I stay if he improves? Or is he a lost cause at this point? What should I do? This definitely sounds like it's some kind of addiction. I mean, the way he's just spending money so willingly, well over $10,000 at this point, on a video game at that, on his phone of all things, is really disturbing to me. So I think your concerns are completely justified. But it really begs the question, what kind of partner are you looking for? Because I think what you're identifying right now is something you really do want to know early on. Can he even save money? Does he have the ability to put money aside for the things that matter the most? And it sounds like right now he really doesn't. And he's had this problem since before you guys have been together. This really would have been something that you would have liked to know probably well before you started dating. But at least there's some kind of silver lining here. It sounds like he really does want to change. And hopefully with some help, he can learn how to manage his money better and be a better boyfriend overall. Because that's a lot of money to spend on a video game when he could have been using that money to further his life and his career. An entitled driver and his friends us, zigzag all over the road, and repeatedly honk the horn at me and my mom. And after we honk the horn telling them to get out of the way, they accidentally drive into traffic and get in an accident. And at this point, we're not sure if we're to blame for their accident. So I had just finished my 8-hour shift, and I had just wanted to go home and de-stress. But my mom had to go to our uncle's house to pick up some stuff for our grandma, and had texted our mom to come and pick it up from his house. So we're on our way to their house, and these guys in a smaller car are actively zigzagging all across the road, right behind us, and repeatedly honking the horn at us. They even came close enough to try and rear-end us. And this is something that happened to my mom when she was pregnant with our youngest brother. Eventually, they pulled up right next to us, and I turn and give them a glare. The driver was a middle-aged man, and the other two was maybe 2 college-age students, from what I recall. They laughed at us before speeding in front of us, and then proceed to brake check us several times. My mom clearly was not impressed by this, and slows down to prevent them from hitting us. But they just kept at it, and by this point, we were just a few blocks away from my uncle's house. These idiots stopped at the light just before the turnoff, and I just sat there. And even after the light had turned green, I remember seeing the college guys looking back at us still laughing. I was about to flip them the bird, because one of them did flip us off, while yelling all kinds of Asian slurs at us out the window. So our mom honks her horn at them, and then the driver, I guess startled but not paying attention to the traffic light, hits the gas before quickly taking the turn off. And this was just as the light had switched to red, and unfortunately they didn't see the other car already coming in their direction. Suddenly their bumper as well as the left rear light got clipped by another car, and they spun out a bit before coming to a stop after climbing the curb of the sidewalk, and the other car's front light headlight was busted. My mom and I were just sitting there shocked by what we were witnessing. Then I see some bystanders that were hanging out at the park nearby. They come jogging over to check on the idiots, who were just as shocked as we were. Then I saw a car pull up next to us and turned to check on those idiots. I didn't realize until my mom pointed out that it was the car that clipped the idiot's car. The bystanders helped these idiots out of their damaged car and onto the sidewalk. My mom didn't wait and just left to get to our uncle's house. Once she reached the turnoff, one of the drivers screamed at my mom, "Hey, why did you honk at me?" My mom just repeatedly kept saying out loud it was their fault for not paying attention to the road, and they kept messing with us. I had every right to honk at them, especially when the light was green and they were just sitting there blocking the road. We ended up staying at our uncle's house for a while to let things blow over a bit, so I hope they learned their lesson of not messing with people on the road, especially one where it's in a neighborhood full of kids. Luckily, there weren't any kids playing outside that day. But what do you guys think? Were we in the wrong for leaving when they got in an accident? Honestly, it was fully their fault, and karma happened to strike them right then and there. You are not at fault in this situation, and you are definitely not the jerk. I can't stand when people act like this on the road. They swerve all over the place, they're up in your face and all over your car, honking the horn and being absolutely obnoxious. Not to mention blocking traffic and brake checking you at every glance. That's honestly insane to me, and it's just so inappropriate. So good for you for honking your horn. I would have done the same thing. It's not your fault they weren't paying attention. That's completely on them. So hopefully they did learn their lesson. That you know what? If you're gonna drive, you need to take it seriously and you need to be safe. Especially in an area where there's a lot of kids. I mean, what were they thinking? Such bad drivers, and hopefully some consequences come their way. My fiance became incredibly religious overnight, and honestly, it's making me very uncomfortable. To start off, I have not yet told him that I find his new deeply intense passion for God and religion to be uncomfortable for me. And I know I need to, but I need advice on how to bring it up and what to say to him. My fiance and I have been together for a little over 3 years now, yet we've known each other since we were both teenagers. He is undeniably my best friend and the sweetest guy to probably ever exist. With him being in the Navy, we've had to deal with a lot of obstacles due to distance, and he is currently serving an 8-month-long period of deployment. He proposed to me back in July, right before he deployed. Ever since I've known him, I've known that he's Christian and that he believes in God. I, on the other hand, believe in God, yet I'm not a very religious person, nor do I believe in a lot of the values that the Bible preaches. I believe that there is a higher power, yet I'm not interested in worshiping, serving, and allowing myself and my choices to be controlled by this higher power. The way I see it, it's my life and I'm my own person, so I should just make my own decisions and choices based on what I think is best for myself and others. That being said, my fiance was the same way, up until about a year ago, that is. He has become very devout, and that has never made me uncomfortable until he suggested that we have his old pastor officiate officiate our wedding in July. My fiance got into contact with this pastor and asked him to officiate our wedding, and the pastor agreed to officiate only if we grow together with Jesus through emails with all three of us and have a Bible study. I wasn't too keen on the idea because I'm not very religious, but I figured perhaps this will be beneficial for our relationship, and it's what my fiance really wanted, so I just went along with it. Well, this pastor began emailing us last week, and I was under the impression that we'd be dealing with growing our relationship together, yet the pastor asked us questions like, "What are you looking for from me? Do you have any spiritual questions I can answer? Tell me more about your spiritual journey," and so forth, which is fine. I don't mind answering these questions. However, the second email we got from this pastor really bothered me. He wrote my fiance and said, "You mentioned in your email, you and your fiance are going to be moving in together once you return from deployment." He then goes on to thanking him for letting him know. He then basically implies that any kind of intimate relationships are designed for husband and wife, and that any relations outside of marriage is not part of his plan and would categorize as a sin. He then goes into some really weird detail about that aspect of our lives in a way that really was uncomfortable, and reading that really just made me nauseous. My fiance and I have been intimate ever since we began dating, not only physically but also emotionally connected, so I found it very strange for him to be asking such specific questions about our relationship, if you know what I mean. I immediately messaged my fiance under the impression that he would feel the same as I do, not interested in anything he's saying, and telling him that this is really not his business. However, he messaged me back with a much different response and basically said that he wouldn't be opposed to the idea of waiting until we're married, if you know what I mean. And that just completely and utterly left me in shock. When did he become so religious like this? Now, I've got to preface this by saying it's not the waiting that bothers me the most. It's the fact that all of a sudden, my fiance is letting his own choices and decisions be influenced greatly by religion. I do not want to be one of those couples, and I'm really not trying to offend anybody. This is just my own personal opinion. I was so shocked I had to respond by saying, "Are you serious?" And he had reassured me that he's not saying yes to the idea, but he's also not saying no to the idea either. I straight up told him I wasn't interested in that kind of relationship. He replied to that with telling me that I should email the pastor my opinion about it, and I know that would just bother me worse. My fiance ended the conversation with the answer that he's still on the fence about it, and that he'll email the pastor back with questions, basically talking about that really private subject matter. I do not want to be with someone who's so religious to the point where they make their decisions based on what the Bible preaches to them, as well as what other people are telling them. I do not want to be in a marriage where I have to be worried that suddenly he's going to whip out the Bible and start sharing some weird scripture with me. That is not the marriage I want. I do not want a marriage based in strict religion and Bible preaching. I do not want a marriage where he's always looking over my shoulder, saying something along the lines of, "Oh, God wouldn't want that. It's my body, it's my mind, it's my life, and it's my decisions." And again, I apologize if I offended anyone with the way I see religion. This is honestly just my perspective, but I really am not sure what to do. This is a tricky situation. For one, I think the pastor's being way too intrusive about your personal life. There's a lot of details here that I left out, but needless to say, it was incredibly personal, and it's not something that I think anybody should really be asking about. And I think it's really backwards that your fiance is more inclined to run things by his pastor first before listening to his future wife. So I don't blame you for being bothered by this. And it honestly could be about anything, you said it best. But it's the fact that an outside influence is basically making the decisions, instead of your husband and yourself. So hopefully you can have this talk with him, and maybe find somebody else to officiate your wedding, because this pastor just sounds really creepy, and if I was in your shoes, I definitely would not want him to officiate mine, especially if he's going to be making those kind of weird comments in the email. My entitled wife blames me for her trip to France going so poorly, claiming that I actively tried to sabotage her trip despite the fact that I paid for all of it and was the only one that planned it out just so she could go in the first place. And now she wants to break up with me, refusing to even talk to me in general until I realize all the wrong that I had done to her. And at this point, I'm so exhausted and I don't know what to do. So my wife has wanted to teach abroad since I've met her. I'm a cautious person at fault, so much so that I told her I really didn't want her to go. This spawned several arguments, with me calling, stating that it's a stupid idea, but only out of pure fear for her safety. Regardless of my fears, I realized I was being inconsiderate, and we've since moved on from that. Fast forward to October, and we have a trip to France scheduled in December for 3 weeks. She's teaching at a school in a small village at an old chateau. She's taking our youngest for the entire time, and then her brother is going out with our oldest for a week. I'm staying behind because finance-wise, I would need to work a lot more to make sure we could afford this. During this time, we get into another argument because I apparently haven't helped her plan the trip and she's struggling. My rebuttal is I've been busy with work and this hasn't been a priority as I'm the sole provider for the family, but that proved to definitely be the wrong answer. I eventually came to my senses and take the reins on the trip planning. The plans for this trip proceeded to change 5 times over the next few weeks up until December, causing me to be on my phone quite a bit with airlines, hotels, and other travel vendors to make sure it all lines up. It's pretty inconvenient and I show flashes of anger because of this, but I always lied and told her everything was fine. After all, I didn't want to make this any worse than I already had. Fast forward to the trip and it's finally here. The first flight goes well, but then her second flight gets delayed 5 hours, which causes her to miss the connecting flight, as well as the connecting train, and miss the first day of school entirely. On top of this, our youngest started feeling unwell. I was on the phone for 4 to 5 hours with different people trying to get things refunded, as well as rescheduled all over again. Once we got everything settled to get her where she needs to go, I finally got to bed. She then calls me an hour after my head hits the pillow. One of the people from the school picked her up and was very mean. Not rude, just mean, calling her a stupid American, even yelling at my youngest for asking questions. And now she just doesn't want to stay. She said she's scared and she doesn't want to stay because she doesn't feel safe. She grew up in a very abusive household and she knows that kind of anger well. So I tell her to leave. We can't get any taxis or Ubers, but one of the teachers can take her into town. They ended up dropping her in the middle of the city with 5% on her phone, nowhere near the Airbnb I had booked. She finally gets to the Airbnb and we're settled in. The next few days are uneventful and we're just planning things as we go, and she starts to fall into a pit of depression. She says she wants to go to Barcelona, but only if it's financially feasible. I tell her that it's an extra expense and that we didn't budget for it, and she just says, okay, that's fine, and we just get off the phone. After we get off the phone, she starts getting hostile, saying things like, this is exactly what you wanted. It didn't work out, so now I can come home and be a good little housewife and do the same thing every day. I tell her that I feel like she's angry at the trip going awry and unfairly taking it out on me, but she says no, she's upset because she just exists for other people. I tell her that maybe we should create something else to look forward to. I said I'm sorry and that I'm trying to sympathize with her more, but she just keeps getting more angry at me. At this point, I'm confused. What am I supposed to do? I listed off all the things I had done to ensure that this trip went as smoothly as it could, but that ended up being the wrong thing to do again. She claimed I was throwing it in her face and that I've done everything I possibly can to apparently try to sabotage this trip from the get-go. The conclusion from this argument was that she wanted to go to Barcelona, and me worrying about finances and throwing these worries in her face was inappropriate given the circumstances of how awful the planned trip had turned out. She ended up not going because of the country's entry restrictions and came home a few days later, depressed as ever. I had cleaned the house, checked off everything on the honey-do list, cooked her dinner, and got her flowers. I did everything. I tried my best to make sure it was the best environment possible. I told her we were going to plan the family trip to Barcelona next year and go to Greece with friends. We just had to wait a little bit longer, but this didn't seem to change her mood at all. I didn't expect it to be instantaneous, but I felt not seen. Was I selfish for this? I stayed home from work on Monday to be with her, and it ended up with her getting drunk by 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Yesterday, I went into work and she asked me to pick up the kids from school. I asked her why I needed to do it, and she just responded that she was drinking. I told her that I don't think drinking at home alone in the middle of the day is the best way to handle everything that's going on right now. I asked if she had planned anything with her friends or even talked to her therapist, and she said, what good would that do for me when I've been doing those things for the past 30 years and they haven't done anything to help? I don't want to fake it until I make it anymore. So if that's what you're asking me to do, then you can forget it. I reiterate to her that I was just trying to help and I wasn't attacking her, and she just turned it into me shaming her for trying to cope with everything going on in her life right now. When I got home, we got into another huge argument that ended up with her leaving, slamming the door, and then calling me on the phone, saying things like, your fragile ego can't handle when I tell you what's wrong. And at that point, I just lost it. I said, you know what? Forget it. I'm done with this conversation. And I hung up the phone. She came back and said she doesn't feel like she can fall apart around me or whatever that means. And to top it all off, she doesn't want to be together anymore. She doesn't want to be with someone that she can't fall apart around. I am so confused. I'm not perfect by any means necessary, but I feel like I literally did everything I could over the last 2 to 3 weeks to make sure that her trip would go as smoothly as possible. And even when things started to go wrong, I did more. Why is she this angry with me? Why am I not allowed to also break down when I feel like I'm being unfairly criticized? We spent so much money on this trip, and I worked 14-hour days last week to make sure our finances wouldn't be more impacted by this than it already has been. She won't talk to me, and she doesn't want to talk to me. She wanted to sleep in the same bed last night, but this morning when I greeted her, she immediately fired back that she doesn't want an in-depth conversation with me. She even said that we could just be platonic friends until I finally came to my senses and realized the wrong that I had done. And I'm honestly at such a loss for words, and I really don't know what to do. Your wife sounds absolutely crazy. I mean, talk about an entitled Karen. You planned this massive trip for her to go out to France and teach in some school in the middle of nowhere, and the very second she experiences any kind of pushback, she suddenly flips the script and says that you tried to ruin this for her, when in reality, based on her attitude, she probably did this to herself. Also, she is so unbelievably ungrateful. You literally worked your butt off just to try and get her to have this trip and to make sure you as a family have money for future anythings. Like literally, this probably costs like thousands of dollars. It's not cheap to go to France and then to turn around and be like, psych, I want to go home. Like that doesn't just happen without a lot of money getting thrown around. And when she's inconvenienced, she tries to go to Barcelona. I mean, what is wrong with this lady? She's twisted everything you've said, she's flipped the script completely, and she has practically blamed you for literally everything in her life. I mean, where's the personal responsibility? Where's the motivation to do better with yourself and take responsibility for your own actions? She really sounds absolutely miserable to put up with, and I really feel for your situation. So hopefully this can all work out in some kind of positive way, because the way your wife is acting is absolutely crazy, and you do not deserve to get thrown under the bus like this for something that was completely out of your control. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. This next one came from the Am I the Jerk podcast subreddit. Check the link in the description if you'd like to submit your own story. Am I the jerk for dropping the hammer on one of my employees after they've repeatedly proved that they are unfit to work at my job? Okay, so I work at a major college in the United States. It's a state school, and we have about 18 employees who work for me. We work maintenance for the college, and I've been here for about 10 years. Since my crew works nights, I am a lot looser with the rules than most supervisors. The night crew gets a lot of flack from the day crew, but the truth is, we are pretty tight-knit, and we don't have a lot of drama, at least compared to the day crew. The day crew is toxic to say the least, and most of the supervisors are objectively incompetent, or simply just don't care. Now, we have our own issues, but my general rule is I like to keep issues in-house unless they become excessive. Over the years, I've caught my employees screwing off before. Most of the time, I give them gentle reminders or make vague announcements to the crew that doesn't single anyone out. However, I've recently had an issue with one employee who's been pushing every boundary he can. It's been going on for years, but for the longest time, people on the crew haven't said anything. They don't want to snitch on each other. However, his bad behavior has gotten so bad that nearly half the crew doesn't want to work with him. He's often been accused of being drunk or high at work. Unfortunately, they only told me days later, so there was nothing I could even do about it. He had some strange encounters with people on campus that I documented and even wrote him up for. However, since we are a state agency, getting someone fired is really a process. 2022, however, was his year to really cut loose. I found him multiple times, simply not working or not even at the job site. He would disappear for hours, lie about it, and say he was using the bathroom. It's amazing how many times he used that excuse. He was constantly leaving the job, sitting around on the job, lying about his whereabouts, and just underperforming at work. There were also several days where people reported that he seems to be under the influence. It really came ahead over the summer, where I directly confronted him about being absent from the job for over an hour. He said he had to get something at the shop, which would just normally take about 15 minutes tops. Well, he comes in over an hour later, carrying with him a sandwich that obviously came from a shop. He claimed that he had to use the bathroom again, and that's why it took so long. The problem is, I was tracking him the entire time. I had a coworker at the shop, and I was at the job. He was at the shop for maybe 5 minutes, got back to the job a few minutes breakfast later and then sat in the truck for another 20 minutes, all before coming inside. All this time, he didn't even eat his sandwich. I confronted him and asked him if he was going to eat while everyone else had been working. Bear in mind that he had just had a lunch break right before the "I had to run to the shop" excuse, and he didn't eat then either. At this point, I had already been fed up with his BS. I told him I was done giving him warnings and that he needed to do better. I told him, "This is your one and only warning." Literally a month later, he starts back up again, not working, sitting around on his phone while other people are working. He would be out smoking while others are working and just leaving the job in general. Someone even saw him stealing, but refused to put it on the record. I was already in the process of writing him up when I discovered that he took a work truck home as well as to a bar. He left an hour early for break and used a state vehicle to go to a bar and to his home. I got photos and locations. I confronted him at the bar, and he claimed that he hadn't had any alcohol. Ironically, the big thing that got him in trouble with HR was using the work truck for personal use. That is a big deal here. After his write-up, he was upset and told me that he knew that me as well as others on the crew had broken the rules too. He mentioned that he had seen me in a drive-thru a few times in a work truck. And honestly, this is true. It was extremely infrequent, but I've done it before. But I also haven't done it in several years. Yes, I am guilty of that crime too, but he took his vehicle home and to a bar, and this was all outside of break time to boot. And you know what? That's something I have definitely not done. I have also used a work truck to swing by the store for lunch before. Have others on the crew stopped for coffee in their work truck or got some teriyaki on break? Yes. And he obviously thinks I'm being a hypocrite because of this. However, I think his frequency, severity, and choice of locations make his offense far worse than the rest of the crew combined. He said he didn't want to be that guy and won't report me or the crew. And you know what? I think he's telling the truth, since this would burn several personal friends of his, and he also really does not have any proof. But I have literal photos. I'm not justifying my past actions, but I won't be intimidated by him in this. He's a heavy drinker and uses recreational drugs. And you know what? I don't care about that if it's not at work. But he has increasingly blurred the line and admitted to drinking only a few hours before work started. The worst part is how he's affected the rest of the crew. About half don't want to work with him, and in one case, almost led to a panic attack. He's lazy, dangerous to work with, and toxic. So I'm looking to get him fired, not by being malicious, but by holding him accountable, documenting and letting him hang himself. He's the kind of guy who floats through life and doesn't care about anyone but himself and just getting wasted. And frankly, I'm done helping him. I know I'm leaving out a lot, so this doesn't come back to me in some way. He's of course playing the victim and thinks that I'm picking on him. My guess is that he will quit out of frustration before he gets fired. I wanted to ask though, am I the jerk for doing this? Am I the jerk for letting him hang himself and making himself be held accountable? Because honestly, I'm not sure what to do. In my opinion, you are not the jerk. This guy is literally digging his own grave. The fact that he took a work truck over to the bar as well as taking it home is really not okay. I'm sure these standards of practice in your company is there for a reason. So for him to use those vehicles for personal use, especially going to a bar, is really a bad look. On the other hand, I don't think you going through a drive-thru or stopping by the store to get some lunch is in any way, shape, or form the same level of damage and public ridicule that could be perceived of him going to the bar in that work truck. Like, that just does not look good in the slightest. That basically says to anybody who's interested in your company, oh, this particular organization definitely likes to get drunk. Whereas you stopping by a fast food restaurant or going to the store probably means just that. Oh, they're stopping for lunch. That's about it. They're not instead getting hammered during work, which this guy is absolutely doing. So no, you've not done anything wrong. This guy literally has it coming. And to calm any fears that you might have, I don't think you're a hypocrite for stopping to get lunch. That seems like a very casual, normal thing to do, and in no way is that the same level of severity that this guy is clearly exhibiting. So I really would not worry about this, because this guy has been very clearly skating on thin ice for a while now, and if he wants to fall through and drown, then I don't think it's your responsibility to try and save him. My parents have actively tried to ruin my professional career, while also trying to destroy my personal life, and I honestly don't know what to do. My mom and dad have always created smear campaigns about me, and crossed all my personal and professional boundaries. As an example, my dad wrote a book about me a few years ago. It was full of personal diary entries and other private information. It was essentially a whole lot of projection and lies, and it was extremely creepy. In 2017, I was diagnosed with complex PTSD. At the same time, time, my parents withdrew support for my PhD. I had two mentors who were separate to my supervisors. One was in her 50s and the other was in her 70s. And they were always supportive of me. They were very disappointed that I had to withdraw. And I just told them that my parents withdrew support and that they were concerned about my physical health. I do have very poor physical health, so it wasn't a lie. The support from my mentors continued. I met them on a work placement in 2012, and we bonded immediately. We would meet 5 to 6 times a year and share lots of professional resources and so on. I didn't tell them about my CPTSD diagnosis or the symptoms and behavior associated with it. At the time, in a family setting, my behavior was pretty terrible, but I was also being abused. My parents even tried to get me criminally convicted for minor property damage, but the judge determined that I was the victim of abuse and my CPTSD had caused the behavior. I returned to my degree in 2019 after receiving treatment for CPTSD. When I returned for Christmas, I met my supervisors for lunch, and at this point, they were distant and very weird. Usually, they would hug me and be enthusiastic about catching up. One of them just gave me the cold shoulder and seemed very disinterested in speaking to me. The other made some weird comments. She asked me randomly out of the blue, "How old is your mom?" My mom, for the record, is 70 years old, but she looks much older. This indicated to me that they had met up. When I shared ideas for the future with them, as I always have, she said, "One thing at a time, listen to your parents." Then, when I was telling her the date my niece was born, she finished the date for me. I said November, and she said the number. They dodged catching up with me for a couple of years. I asked if anything was wrong. They assured me that everything was fine. I then told them that I really valued my relationship with them and that I was open to speaking about anything. I asked my mom if she and my dad had spoken to them, but they denied it. I eventually saw them again a year ago. They finished the catch-up by saying, "Well, best wishes for the future," and I didn't know what to say. I was diagnosed with cancer last year, and they seemed totally nonchalant about it. I found out that they're hosting a big lunch at a pub for Christmas for people in our field next weekend, and they didn't even invite me. I don't know what to do. There's a good chance that they've been fed total lies. I really valued my relationship with them, and I think they're terrific people, but now I'm honestly so upset. Is there any coming back from this? What should I do? This is actually really tragic. The fact that your mom and dad are actively trying to basically ruin your life is unbelievably toxic and completely inappropriate. This type of behavior is unacceptable in my opinion, and you do not deserve to be treated like this. And it's really disappointing that your mentors would believe you're terrible parents instead of going to you first. If anything, that shows you that their mentorship towards you was probably very one-sided. They most likely only kept it up because you were some promising talent that they could use later in life. I don't know, something along those lines. But for me personally, when someone turns on me like that and basically starts to act like they're not my friend or my mentor in some way, and I know for a fact that other toxic people have had their hands in this relationship, that essentially proves to me right then and there that my relationship with them was obviously very shallow at best, despite how deep I may have thought it actually was. So let that be your exit sign, to be honest. You can find other mentors, you can find other programs. I mean, look at the facts here. They completely excluded you from this dinner event that you obviously would have thought they would have included you in. It's not like you guys don't have history together. I mean, that's insane. So that honestly is really disappointing, and I'm so sorry that this is happening to you. This is so unacceptable. So hopefully you're able to find some kind of solutions here, because the way your parents are acting is so unbelievably toxic, as well as damaging to your career and livelihood as a whole. And honestly, you do not deserve that. An entitled Karen threatens to get me fired from Home Depot, claiming that I was refusing her service and that I had insulted her, all because I don't know how to mix paint, despite the fact that this is not my department. Thankfully, a coworker was there to back me up, and he put this entitled Karen in her place. Here's what happened. So I've only worked at Home Depot for about 4 months when this happened, and I still don't understand why people think they can boss associates around instead of just getting it themselves. I've only been at work for about an hour, and it was a pretty slow afternoon. A few customers scattered here and there, some just browsing about, and others were just picking up all sorts of orders and other stuff. I'm patiently waiting at my counter at the lumber side of the store, and this was just before we swapped to self-checkout registers. I was reading a booklet that my supervisor had every cashier read, and my sign was off. All of a sudden, a paint lid gets dropped on my countertop, and I suddenly whip my head to see this middle-aged Karen standing there looking at me with her phone out and texting away. So I say to her in a professional tone, "I'm sorry, but the paint desk is down on the other end of the store." And before I could describe exactly where it was, this lady said,
I know, but I'm in a hurry. Go get it for me.
I looked at her and I said, I'm sorry, but I don't even work at the paint desk, and I'm not supposed to leave my register unattended. This entitled Karen finally looks up from her phone and says to me,
but I've seen you run the paint desk before, and I know it's you, because you mixed my paint the other day and I need more. Now go get it done for me now.
And when she said this, I was really confused. I looked at her and I said, I'm sorry, but I think you must be mistaken with someone else. I don't have any paint mixing experience, and I've never run the paint desk ever before. This entitled Karen then says that every time she's come here, the cashier always goes and gets the paint for her. But I stood my ground and I said, well, I'm not that cashier, and I don't know what paint mixture you want. This Karen rolls her eyes and says,
well, that's why I brought the lid. Just take it and run it through the machine and get me my paint.
At this point, I'm starting to feel like a broken record. I say, I've already told you, I don't have paint experience. I'm just a cashier and I'm not a paint associate. And this is not the paint desk. Listen, I'm sure the paint desk associate can easily mix it for you. If you go and speak to them yourself, they can help you get it taken care of. This entitled Karen gives me a condescending wave and says,
yeah, just go and get my paint. I'm in a hurry and I can't stand around like you people.
And at that point, once she said that, I started to get really annoyed. This time I said it more firmly but still professional. Ma'am, this isn't the paint desk and I'm not supposed to leave my cash register unattended. Either you go to the paint desk yourself or you can leave. But this set off this entitled Karen in a way that I was not expecting. Clearly upset that I had spoken to her like this, this entitled Karen said,
I said I'm in a hurry and I need my paint right now.
And she said this rather aggressively, trying to make me go get this paint for her. But I stood my ground again and I said, I've already told you, I'm not going and you can go to the paint desk yourself. This entitled Karen is now glaring daggers at me and says to me,
I don't like your tone of voice that you're using with me. Maybe I should report you to corporate for refusing me service.
I respond by saying, I'm not refusing you service. I'm telling you that I can't provide you what you want because I have no experience in that department. Right then, a pro desk associate walked by and the Karen turns to her, demanding to know if she's the manager because apparently I was disrespecting her, as well as refusing to provide her proper customer service. The pro desk member said, I'm not the manager, but I can assist you. The Karen then says,
finally, someone who can actually do their job. I need paint, and this Asian kid refuses to go and mix my paint for me when I've seen them mix paint for me many times.
The pro desk member says, well, if you need paint mixed, you can easily get it yourself, not stand here at the lumber register and demand that we do it for you. And that finally shut that Karen up. She throws her hands up in the air with frustration and walks away, yelling,
nobody in this store knows how to do their job. Why hire workers if they're just gonna stand around and be on their phones only?
The pro desk and myself were dumbfounded by Karen's outburst, but we didn't follow her out. Instead, pro desk took the lid and tossed it because it's not our job to mix the paint for her. Besides, the small dot on the lid probably would have told the paint desk what paint the Karen actually needed, but it wasn't going to help me with anything. And the funny part is, at one point I honestly really did want to mix paint, but after asking a paint desk coworker about it, I changed my mind. And you know what? I would much rather be stuck as a cashier than deal with some weird entitled Karen screaming at me about paint. What a crazy entitled Karen. I mean, how weird can you possibly be to not know where you need to go to get your paint mixed? It's like this lady just picked a random spot and decided, I'm picking on you today. Like, it's really strange. And I really hate when people act like this, especially when it's at the expense of other people around them. Thankfully though, the original poster had some backup, because otherwise this crazy lady probably would have stayed there screaming at this person, demanding them to do a job that clearly was not their responsibility. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. I'm afraid of telling my family that I'm dating someone new, and I honestly don't know what to do. So 3 months ago, almost 4 now, I broke up with my ex-boyfriend of 4 years. I tried to fix our relationship, but he was an alcoholic and would never give up drinking, and he also wouldn't get help for his debilitating mental illnesses, even though they were a burden for me as well. I also just knew in me that he wasn't gonna be the one for me, so this made me check out and grieve my relationship before it even ended. When I told my mom and my sister I was breaking up with him, they were appalled and offended because it came out of the blue for them, and they were upset that I never confided in them about my struggles in our relationship. I didn't want to burden people with my problems, and I also didn't feel comfortable discussing that stuff with them. So when the breakup happened, I feel like they were against me, but ultimately they came around. Flash forward to now, I've been hanging out and getting closer to to a good friend of mine that I met at work 2 years ago. He is so sweet and funny, we like the same music, he goes to concerts with me, and is just someone I align with more, and I feel drawn to him. When I first met him, I always knew he was going to be someone special, and I always found him very attractive. I haven't brought up my feelings of liking him to my mom and my sister. In fact, they've never even met him, and this is mostly just because I want to keep things private, but I keep getting anxiety about them getting mad at me for not telling them these things. And the other day, he confessed his feelings to me and asked me on a date. I don't know how to bring it up to them, and I guess I'm just scared they're gonna berate me or try to tell me I'm just moving too fast. I personally feel ready, and I'm just nervous for some reason. They like to be very in my business, and I'm just so anxious to tell them that I'm seeing someone new, especially when my relationship was so long. What should I do? That really is unfortunate that your mom and your sister are really up in your business. Like, that has to be really annoying. And it's also not fair that they were getting all over you about you breaking up with your boyfriend. Like, do you really need to tell them everything that's going on in your life? Why are they supposed to know out of anybody? I know if I was struggling in a relationship like this, I probably wouldn't want anybody else to know. Like, it's nobody's business but my own. So in that respect, I really don't blame you for keeping it to yourself. Ultimately though, it really is up to you. You could go the route of just telling them, hey, I am dating this new guy and I really do like him, but this does basically open up the door to them telling you what you should and shouldn't do, which from the sounds of it, it looks like you don't really want that. You probably just want them to be your mom and your sister, which I think is reasonable for just about anybody. There's the other option where you just don't tell them what's going on. Go on the date, maybe go on 3 or 4, and then see where it goes. Because I think you already know what they're gonna probably try and say. Oh, it's too early, you shouldn't be dating this early, we don't like him, you can't date him unless we've seen him first. Stuff like that I'm willing to bet is something they will say. So hopefully this goes well for you either way with whatever you choose to do. Because in the end, this is your life, and what they have to say truly does not make a difference, nor should it be the deciding factor of what you can and cannot do in your life. An entitled customer tells me that I shouldn't tell my customers that any kind of gratuity would be appreciated after their dinner, and I'm really annoyed by what he had to say, and I'm not sure what to make out of it. So for context, I work at a bar in North Carolina, which sees a ton of golf groups passing through. It's a huge tourist town, and a dream destination for anyone worth their weight in golf balls. Anywho, this group of 12 came in on a Wednesday night, and mentioned that they had been out in the night before. From talking to my co-owner, I had already determined that she had only had one large group the night before, and that they were super nice and had tipped her generously, on top of the 20% auto gratuity that our system adds when you open a table of 6. Not that I cared, but you know how comfortable it can feel to walk up to a table that you know is easy. Fast forward through service, and they've had to split into an 8 top and a 4 top because our only 12 top was taken, and they couldn't care less. My coworker and I were busy as all get out, but I take good care of them. Everything goes great, food and drinks flow, and I'm just waiting on them to finish up so I can cash them out and grab my shift drink. The guys at the 8 top cash out. I have a double-sided pen with a pink highlighter on the end, so as per usual, I highlight the gratuity as the print on our tickets is small, and it tends to blend in with the tax. I also tell each person I hand a bill to that there is an included gratuity due to the size of the party, but that they're more than welcome to leave me a bit extra if they'd like. The guys at the 8 top leave, while the 4 top lingers to watch the end of a game. When I drop their checks, I do my usual speech. The gratuity's on there and I run their cards. But here is where things get a little weird. One of the guys flags me back over after I've done my official goodbye and asks if he can offer me a tip. Internally rolling my eyes, I smile and I say sure. He tells me that I shouldn't tell people about the gratuity. You read that right. He told me that I shouldn't have said anything about gratuity and that I shouldn't tell people in the future. He said that I had done a great job taking care of them and that I deserve the money. My response to this was that I considered it stealing to mislead someone into essentially tipping me twice, and that I was fairly sure it was illegal to do that. He simply continued saying that I deserved it and that I would make more money that way. I told him that I would much rather have my tips be earned and knowingly given to me. I then proceeded to excuse myself from the table. They tipped me well and I was appreciative, but while serving is my job, I care about much more than the money. I take pride in my customer experience and my integrity, and it rubbed me the wrong way that they were offering me advice that equated basically to stealing. I still can't tell if he was insinuating that people wouldn't add a deserved tip on top of gratuity, or that he thought that I should get literally as much money as possible. It was a wild night all around, and I honestly am still trying to figure out what he was talking about. So in my opinion, I think the server's doing the right thing here. They're being honest with their customers and saying, hey, there is already a gratuity percentage that is coming out of this check, thus basically warning them, hey, you've already tipped me and you don't even know about it. So I think if anything, you're just being honest with your customers. You have it right, your moral compass is correct, and you're doing things exactly how it should be. But you know what? Think about the opposite. What if you didn't tell them, and they found out after the fact that they basically tipped you twice? I'm pretty sure somebody's still going to complain that you didn't warn them ahead of time that they were already tipping you. Like, this could definitely go both ways. But I think the way you're handling it is exactly how I would do it. I would let them know ahead of time, just so there's no surprises on the way out the door. My job is overworking me and underpaying me in a serious way, and I'm right on the verge of quitting and I don't know what to do. So this is mostly a rant because I am one inconvenience away from quitting my job. For some context, I serve at a middle-of-the-line sushi restaurant with expensive food that is pretty average tasting. I've only been serving for 3 months or so, and lately I feel super overwhelmed with the amount of work I'm doing, especially since a lot of our servers have just straight up quit. We have one host, one server, and a manager for our lunch shift, and usually the manager ends up serving. Several times I've worked on a random Tuesday when we have a full house for some reason, and my manager and I split the house evenly. Keep in mind, almost every single person orders a roll or a bento box with appetizers and bar drinks that we make ourselves. I also have to bus my own tables. During today's shift, the restaurant filled up fast, and by the time 12:30 rolled around, I had 7 to 9 tables at once, and I couldn't even count how many because I was so busy. My manager had the same amount of people, only he helped out more with the larger parties, and I had mostly tables of 4 or less, with only a few 5+ tables. I was probably serving 25 to 30 people at any given moment. I know we're understaffed, and that the business makes more money off of having less servers scheduled, and my manager has made no efforts to replace the servers we've lost, so things don't look like they're gonna improve anytime soon. I don't know if I'm just inexperienced, so that's why I'm overwhelmed, but every time I finish work, I feel so emotionally and physically drained. So far, the shifts haven't gotten any easier, and I'm not given real breaks, even though my shifts will often run for more than 6 hours. Even my manager said it felt like this place was sucking the life out of him slowly. Now you might be thinking, if I have so many tables, I must be getting some good tips, right? Nope, we made about $300 in tips during that shift, but I don't get to keep my share because all of our money goes into a tip pool that is shared with the front and back of house, including the kitchen. I also believe that the head chef and the manager also get to keep tips. At the end of the week, we got our tips, and for 30 hours of work, I get $200, and that was for the entire week. Another week, I got $160 in tips for 20 hours. So not only do I feel constantly overwhelmed and overworked, but I don't even get the proper tip money in exchange for selling my soul to this place. Is this normal for a serving job? Does it get easier the longer you go? I'm honestly just so depressed with this job. I have never participated in any endeavor that has left me this beaten up at the end of my days. What should I do? That is crazy to me that you can't keep your own tips. If you had less servers and you have all these tables and you're getting all these tips, then maybe this would be worth it. Like, if I was in your shoes, I would just make it work if I was getting all this money in tips and I was able to keep it. But the fact that you have to split that with basically everybody in that restaurant is unbelievably disgusting. Tip pools are absolute garbage in my opinion. Give the money to the servers. They're the ones who are basically waiting on me hand and foot. Yes, the chefs made the food, but the servers dealing with my garbage, as well as everybody else's garbage. So yeah, they deserve to have a tip. So from my point of view, none of this sounds normal, and it kind of sounds like you're getting screwed over. You're working way too hard, you're getting very little money, and it's just not fair for you. So I think you should really try to find a new job. This place sucks. Like, legitimately, having a consistently full house every day and still only having one server is crazy. There are much better serving jobs out there. These people that you're working for are clearly taking advantage of you, and if I was in your shoes, I would get out of there and I would get out fast. My mom and my grandma only see me as a toddler, and they don't recognize me as a fully functioning adult who's making money and earning a living, and I'm honestly not sure what to do in order to set some kind of boundaries with them. So truly, I really do love my family, but there definitely is a major issue, and I can't discuss it with them because if I try, it results in gaslighting, gatekeeping, silent treatments, and preaching about the Lord like their life depends on it. For context, I'm turning 20 in just a couple of months. I have a job and I help pay for food when I can. I'm actively looking for a second job so I can start helping out with bills in the form of rent, just so I'm not a freeloader. I live with my mother and my grandmother. My mother has been doing relatively okay. She drives me to and from work to help out, and I center my work schedule around hers to compensate for her having to drive me. My grandmother, though, dear God, if I wake up even in a slightly cranky mood where I'm so much as not smiling, she's practically in tears, saying that she's worthless, that I don't love her, and then she'll give me the silent treatment, preaching from the Bible the entire time. I'm an atheist, but none of my family knows this, so I just have to grin and bear it. She compares me to me as a child, and my mother and grandmother both do this. They pull out photos of me and say how cute I was, how I was their little girl, how they still, in their hearts, see me as a 5-year-old little girl, and that it hurts them when I'm upset because it's shocking. It's to a point where I resent my younger self. I hate memories of me as a child because it's just a reminder that I'm not who they thought I'd be, and I'm just a disappointment. I don't even get that upset. They act like I insult their livelihood. The worst I ever do is glare. I usually just keep my mouth shut because I hate being angry at all, and I usually get over it within 10 minutes or so. I never insult anybody as I feel absolutely horrible about doing that. I also would never hit or even raise my hand. I would never do that. Most I ever say is to remind them that I'm sensitive to loud noises, or that I didn't sleep very well, or I just want to be left alone, stuff like that. They expect me to constantly be a family person, to constantly want to be around them with a smile on my face, to always want to be home and be the toddler that they see me as. They want me to go to church, and they want me to stay at home forever and help them afford things financially, as I'm the only one capable of working. They can't live without me. It is honestly exhausting, and frankly, I feel like I'm going to lose my cool at them every day if I don't figure out a way to talk to them and get them to at least set some boundaries. What should I do? Man, that sounds like a rough situation. It's really weird that they don't do any work at all, and they've basically shipped all of that off to you. And it's also really crazy that they're comparing you to your younger self, basically denying you of any adulthood and treating you like a baby, all while then expecting you to provide for the family. Like, that's just really weird in my opinion, and it sounds like a form of manipulation if anything. They want to try and keep you as a kid, yet still expect you to provide all this stuff for them, and that's not okay in my opinion. I know that if I lived in that kind of situation, I'd be looking to move probably pretty quickly, because that just does not sound feasible, and you just can't be happy with that, to be honest. So if anything, maybe some distance really would do you some good. Moving out really is a big decision if you do decide to do that, and it's something that really does take a lot of time and a lot of thought to make sure it's right. But in this situation, considering that they're acting like narcissists and basically being all around really terrible towards you, some distance and maybe another place to live probably would not be a bad idea in this situation. Today, I messed up by watching so much Family Guy that I had a psychotic breakdown. So about a year ago, I went through a massive Family Guy phase. I don't know why. I had only watched Family Guy a few times before, but for some reason, I started to believe that Family Guy was the funniest show on earth. My best friend at the time also started to go through a Family Guy phase as well, because every time I went over to his house, I'd make him put it on. Anyways, one day I was hanging out with my friend. This was during my college winter break, so I had a whole month off. Since I had a month off, I could stay over at my friend's place for as long as we could stand to be in each other's presence. For some reason, because we had this spare time, I came up with the idea to watch Family Guy in its entirety. We thought it'd be easy. We had a second TV set up where we could run up video games. At this point, we were playing Minecraft pretty much all the time, so we could play that while we were watching Family Guy. Minecraft really doesn't take too much attention, so we would instead be able to give most of our attention to the cinematic masterpiece unfolding on the adjacent TV. One issue with our plan to watch Family Guy in its entirety was that the show is like 6 to 7 days long in its total runtime, so me and my friend decided to leave it running 24/7. Who cares if we miss a season or two overnight? Anyways, I didn't realize Family Guy wasn't the best show to sleep next to, because it'll pretty much wake you up over and over again. Well, me, being the OCD jerk that I am, told myself that I couldn't turn it off no matter what. I had to finish this Family Guy challenge. For 4 days, I got little to no sleep. If I had to guess, I'd say I got 1 hour of sleep total in those 4 days. On day 5, the lack of sleep started to take a toll on me. I started to hallucinate and hear the Family Guy characters talking. I could have sworn Peter Griffin was in my best friend's closet. As the day progressed, so did the severity of my psychosis. I went from Peter Griffin in the closet to I am in Family Guy. I started to believe I was in a Family Guy episode. My friend was Brian, his sister was Meg. I remember waking up my friend to ask if Stewie was okay. My friend, being the jerk that he is, thought this was hilarious, but my mental state was getting worse. After about an hour of this, I started to get paranoid. I guess I was terrified of the character by the name of Herbert from Family Guy, because I started to believe that he was spying on me through the windows. This then progressed to me believing that my friends were helping Herbert out, which led me to get violent. One thing led to another, and I get taken to the ER for sleep deprivation and psychotic symptoms. I'm better now. I'm over the Family Guy phase, as I've now watched Rick and Morty, but next time I'm not gonna watch anything for that long ever again. That sounds like literally a crazy battle to fight. You're losing your mind and you're watching, in my opinion, one of the worst shows on TV. Sorry, for me personally, I'm not a big fan of Family Guy. So I can only imagine the nightmare hellscape you traversed as you basically stayed up for 4 days and watched these crappy jokes by Family Guy. So needless to say, I am not envious of you, and hopefully something like that doesn't happen in the future. Two entitled parents demand that their child hold the very venomous green mamba that their spoiled child is absolutely obsessed with at the zoo. But even after they are obviously told no, that's not gonna happen, they freak out and cause a massive scene, and I honestly could not be more baffled by their stupidity. Here's what happened. So I work at a zoo, and we're mostly closed for the winter, but our reptile house is still open because it's kept at the same temperature year-round. I'm working and I'm showing people what the different animals are, and I'm answering their questions when a family consisting of 2 parents and 1 kid come into the reptile house. They're mostly just chilling and hanging out, doing what all visitors do. That is, until I hear the kid say that he wants to hold the green mamba. Normally, we let kids hold some of the reptiles if they are non-venomous and non-aggressive, but green mambas are venomous, and this one in particular gets really aggressive when near people. The parents come and they actually ask me if their kid can hold it, and I tell them that he can't for all the above reasons, and they then relay this message over to this kid. But this is not what this spoiled brat wanted to hear, because he then throws a massive fit. Apparently, his favorite color is green, and he only wanted to hold that snake. We had other green snakes, and thinking back, I should have just gotten a different snake and told him it was a green mamba to avoid all of this garbage, but at the time, I just didn't think of it. These 2 stupid parents actually come back to me again, asking if their son can hold the green mamba, and I firmly said, no, he can't do that. And after I said this, it was then the parents' turn to get upset. And not only upset, they got very loud, and they started calling me a terrible zookeeper, and that I should apparently just let their kid hold the snake. Eventually, and thankfully, my manager hears the commotion, and so did pretty much every other guest. My manager comes over to see what's wrong. They tell him that I'm not letting their kid hold a snake, when our zoo lets kids hold snakes all the time. There is really only 5 snakes that we let people hold, mostly because snakes don't like being held. So my manager, trying to fix the situation as best as he could, tells the parents and the kid to follow him, as he would find a snake that they actually could hold. But they didn't want to hold another snake. They stopped him in his tracks, and they said, we want to hold this one, the green mamba, and they demanded that it had to be this one snake. He then looks at them and tells them exactly what I told them, stating that we can't let guests hold venomous snakes. And wouldn't you guess it, after hearing exactly what they didn't want to hear, they started yelling at my manager as well. Now, my manager doesn't have a lot of patience, so he just tells them to get out or he's gonna call security to force them out. They promptly left, but not without yelling some terrible remarks towards us, basically saying that they're never coming back. And honestly, with all things considered, I truly hope they never come back. The parents in this story are literally just complete idiots. Like, there's literally no other way to describe them. They were demanding for their kid to hold a green mamba. For some context, if you get bit by a green mamba, it quite literally shuts down your ability to breathe. I mean, that does not sound like a good time. And with all that in consideration, this snake will literally unalive you. Like, there's just no way around it. And these stupid parents were like, no, but our kid wants to hold it, please. Like, how stupid can you possibly get? So it's honestly probably really smart that the zookeepers say, nope, you're not holding a venomous snake, which is a lot different than a constrictor snake, but still equally as scary. I mean, snakes in general just freak me out for the most part, and I'm really not a big fan, so I just cannot understand anybody being like, ooh, let me hold that one. Like, nope, I'm out. I'm not gonna get near any of those. So hopefully these entitled parents educate themselves, because their spoiled brat of a child clearly has them well trained to pretty much give them anything that they want. And apparently that includes a highly venomous snake. My coworker criticized me and mocked me, claiming that I'm not working hard enough and that I'm not doing enough enough in the restaurant that we work at, and now it's making me question everything that I've currently been working for, and I honestly don't know what to do. So I went into the service industry to challenge myself. I have pretty bad social anxiety disorder, and so I thought if I put myself in an uncomfortable environment, I tough it out and come out the other end a better and more mature person. My parents agreed, my therapist agreed, and everyone was happy I was taking this step. But I don't really have a good time at the restaurant, and the thought of going back takes over all my thoughts in any given week. Everyone said to get out of my comfort zone, but they didn't mention that I may be in that uncomfortable zone indefinitely without the ability to improve. Now, let it be noted, the job itself doesn't make me uncomfortable. I've never felt nervous or incapable, even in the busiest of hours. I've never seen that kind of person, and even within my training days, I was totally calm, and I remember them being busy days. However, I made no connections. I really don't have any friends, and I am surrounded by people, yet I am very alone. The only thing that I have is that I have a good work ethic, and at least I know I'm doing a good job when it comes to keeping up with the buzzing tables, running foods, drinks, helping the servers, and so on, which in all honesty isn't hard, but at least I do it well. And then last shift, one of my coworkers pulled me aside and told me he had to have a serious talk. He said I need to pick up the pace because I was apparently going too slow, which I can understand. It sucks to have mistakes pointed out to you, but I mean, I will take it in stride and just do better. But he felt the need to keep going and could have just asked me to work faster, but he didn't. He went on to talk about how we all make the same pay and that they're all busting their butts while I'm barely working and making the same, then started comparing me to a tortoise. At that point, I got defensive and I said, look, I've been buzzing tables all day, to which he then commented about the pay thing again and actually called me a tortoise again, though this time started making mocking noises and finished it all off by saying, and that's how we all feel. I came out of that interaction thinking how weird it was. First of all, this is the first time anyone has complained about my work. I'd understand if he had asked me before to pick up the pace, and I didn't. And then if he had to tell me again, then yeah, I'd understand the rant. However, this is the first time anyone has called me out on anything. It's also the first time someone's had something to say about my work that isn't positive or a compliment. I feel like it was super weird to go on a whole rant on why I should pick up the pace instead of acting like a normal coworker and simply asking me to do so. And now, because of a very simple request that was, in my opinion, completely unnecessary, turned into some massive confrontation. I am now questioning my position in the restaurant as a whole in terms of how everyone sees me. And honestly, who was we in that situation? The fact that he said that this is how we all feel really makes me paranoid. Is it the server assistants? The servers themselves? Is it the whole restaurant? I plan on at least confronting the coworker that talked to me. I will say that I appreciate the honesty, and if he ever needs to tell me that I've messed up in the future, to do so, but to simply tell me and not go on a rant again, because I don't need it and I shouldn't be talked to that way. Somehow I feel like I'm overreaching, but at the same time, no one has ever talked to me that way in any job I've ever had. It was completely out of left field, and it felt mildly personal. No matter how much I try to think of it this way, I can't help but feel like he's trying to tell me that we don't want you here. If you were to inform a coworker that they're making work harder for you, how would you word it? Do you agree with my coworker's approach? I'm new to the service industry. Maybe this is more common than I think. I mainly feel useless because I haven't been working for long, maybe about 2 months in total. That's it. I feel obligated to keep working at least another 3 to 4 months before quitting, so I can feel like I actually tried. But in all honesty, a lot of me is really just pushing to quit right now. I really thought I could do this. My friend, who is also socially anxious, during high school would tell me how working at a restaurant brought him out of his shell, and he's been much more outgoing, and he now makes good money as a bartender. I guess the promise of the change in personality, coupled with the promise of good pay, intoxicated me. I came into work in the restaurant with the most positive dispositions, but now I find that I have very little of that left, and I worry that it shows, and I honestly don't know what to do. Honestly, that place sounds super toxic. I've also worked in the food industry, and I don't think I've ever had a coworker come up to me and say, yo man, you gotta start working harder. Like, screw that guy's a jerk. I would not take that coworker's advice seriously, because you know what, that guy's probably worked there for like 12 years, and he hates the fact that there's a new guy in the kitchen. And the fact that he was mocking you and claiming that this is how we all feel is borderline bullying. I would honestly go straight to your manager manager and say, hey, this one coworker is harassing me at work, and let them take care of it. And don't for a second put yourself in a position where this guy can then make weird comments towards you and basically put you down at the drop of a hat. He is not your manager. He is just another coworker. So don't tell him that he can correct you. Screw that guy. That guy seriously is just a jerk. And you'll run into a lot of those in the food industry as well, unfortunately. A lot of jaded, angry people who work there just to make ends meet. There can be diamonds in the rough, so to say, but from my personal experience, those are far and few between. Also, if you feel like you need to quit because this job has turned into some toxic, weird environment, then go ahead and quit. Like, there's no shame in saying, you know what, this job is not for me. And forcing yourself to keep working for 3 to 4 months on a job that you know for a fact is not where you want to be at sounds absolutely miserable. So start the process of looking for another job. If this is the work environment that you're currently dealing with, I can guarantee you that you're not the first person in this company's history to leave after just a few months. So I just wouldn't be so hard on yourself. And I would not listen to what this guy is saying to you because he literally doesn't know what he's talking about. And if anything, he's just a massive bully who clearly needs to be put in his place. An entitled old man stops his car and parks it in the middle of the road and refuses to move it and park in an actual parking spot. But once I threatened to call the police or an ambulance to try and take care of this old man, he changed his tune, got in his car, and moved out of the way. Here's what happened. So something bizarre happened to me yesterday. I was pulling into a parking lot when the car in front of me suddenly came to a complete stop in the middle of the lane. Its owner, an older white man, turned it off and got out and started walking into the nearest store in the strip mall. Yeah, you heard that right. He just parked his car in the middle of the lane, in the middle of the road. I could have gotten around it if I really tried, but it would be dangerously close to either his car or the other parked cars. I lightly tapped my horn twice at him, seeing as how I was essentially stuck now. He turned around and I rolled down my window and I said to him, hey man, that's not a parking space. He dramatically pointed at my car and did this right this way motion with both hands, sort of aiming at the very narrow path that I guess he thought I should be able to get through. So I repeated myself again, sir, that's not a parking space. I can't get around you. He responds by saying, why is it that one of you people every time just go around? So this led me to believe that, oh, he's done this before. I say to him, sir, what are you doing? That's not a parking space. I need you to move your car. Mind you, there's no way I'm getting around him. He responds to me by saying that I apparently just need to mind my own business. So I reiterate myself again, saying, come on, you can't park there. Just please move your car. At this point, his lips were doing that weird shake thing that old people do when they hang their mouths open. I guess he thought he was being intimidating or something. He stepped up to my window and yelled at me, you want to make me? So yeah, I was right. He's definitely done this before, and he's being an aggressive jerk. Now, I've read online where other people have interacted with older Karens, and there's apparently a card that you can play that can bypass this sort of attitude. I look at him with actual concern and I say, sir, are you okay? Do you know where you are right now? He looks at me and says, what? I repeat myself, are you with someone? Is there someone who's supposed to be helping you today? At this point, he looked confused, which is exactly what I wanted. As he said, wait, what are you doing? I respond by saying, do you need help? It sounds like you don't know where you are, and I'm worried for you. Is there anyone I can call for you to help you out? It was at this point that I'm pretty sure he caught on to what I was doing, and he switched back from being confused back to being angry. He responds aggressively by saying, I don't know. Is there anyone I can call for you? And I wasn't sure if this was some kind of weird veiled threat, so I just kept up the act, and I said, sir, it's okay. It's okay. Don't worry. You just stay right there, and I'll call someone who can come help you. Don't worry. It'll be okay. Just don't move, and I'll call for an ambulance. At this point, I backed into a parking space that had opened behind me and pulled out my phone. I really was just gonna call 911, but only because he was too confrontational to be left unattended in the public. Of course, as with most bullies, the moment they realize they don't have any power over you, he gave up, muttered something to me, and got back in his car and left. On my way out of the parking lot, I saw that he had miraculously found his way into a parking spot on the other side of the lot. And honestly, he probably should have done that in the first place and saved both of us a lot of trouble. What a weird situation to be stuck in. Literally, they're just driving down the road and some guy just stops in the middle of the road to go shopping or something like that. I mean, what an absolute jerk. And I think the original poster is right. He has clearly done this before, and he wanted to be some weird entitled old person and not move in the slightest. But I absolutely love what the original poster's done. I have never seen anybody pull this off, but it's really cool to see that it actually worked. This guy changed his tune completely, and he straightened up and got back in his car and found a parking spot, which he should have done in the first place as it is. But thankfully, this weird entitled old man didn't get his way, and he was forced to get back in his car and move it to a parking spot, because the way he was acting definitely seemed like he was losing his mind, and hopefully in the future, he won't act like this moving forward. My bus driver was playing music at an unreasonable volume, and when I tried to tell them to turn it down, they became incredibly passive-aggressive and very rude, and I honestly was so surprised. So this happened back in high school. I took the school bus to and from school, as I didn't have a car at the time. One day, I got on the bus after school, and I noticed that we had a new bus driver. They change up bus drivers all the time, so this wasn't a huge shock. I sat down in the front row seat on the right side of the bus, across the aisle from the driver, and right in front of the stairs. Kids were still boarding, so the bus wasn't moving, but the radio was on. I don't remember what the station was, and it doesn't honestly really matter. All I know is that it was playing just a bit too loud for my taste. It wasn't blasting, just one notch above what I'm comfortable with. I'm autistic and a bit sensitive to noise, and while this was nowhere near loud enough to make my brain shut down, it was a bit uncomfortable. And so this is the resulting conversation between me and the bus driver. So as I'm leaning over so that she can hear me over the general chatter of the bus, I say to the bus driver, "Excuse me, could you please turn the music down just a little bit?" The bus driver didn't answer for a moment. She then got on the radio PA system, temporarily paused the music, and said to the entire bus, "Just so you all know, I'm gonna be playing the radio. My son works for the radio station, so I'm not gonna turn it off." Did you pick up on that, by the way? I told her to please turn it down a little bit, not to turn it off completely. While it is possible that she misheard me, the chatter of the other kids was not that loud that day. There wasn't much interference nearby, because none of the talkative people sit in the front row. Even if she had misheard me, I made sure to ask extremely politely. I wasn't using any sort of tone, and my volume was exactly the kind anyone would use in a moderately crowded room. It was abundantly clear I was not being rude or hostile, but for some unexplainable reason, instead of politely turning and saying something like, "Oh, I'm sorry, but my son works for the radio station as a DJ. I'd like to have the radio on so I can hear him," she decided to be passive-aggressive. Being incredibly shy, I never asked again or bothered to clarify what I'd said. I was far too intimidated. From that point onward, I just brought headphones to school just to wear on the bus to slightly dampen the noise. I'm not sure if I was the one being entitled here. If I was, then I'll just blatantly accept that. But I felt like she overreacted to a polite request, and it honestly just came off as rude. Okay, so call me crazy, but I'm honestly not on the original poster side on this one. Here you have a bus driver who's driving teenage kids to and from school, and they probably have to hear the weirdest conversations on planet Earth. And the one thing that drowns out that noise and allows them to do their job without losing their mind is probably the radio. And I bet there's probably some kind of rules associated with their job where they can't have headphones on or anything to drown out those kids in the back. I don't know if you've ever ridden the bus, but personally, I've never had a good experience on the bus. But now that I'm an adult, I have a lot more sympathy for the bus driver. And I definitely remember some of the garbage that bus drivers I knew about had to go through on a daily basis with some of these kids. So was it entitled for the original poster to request that the music get turned down just a little bit? Not completely, in my opinion, but I also think that the original poster probably should have just said nothing. And unfortunately, the bus driver response is not surprising to me. When it comes to high school kids, sometimes being polite just doesn't work. They will eat you alive if you act like that. So passive-aggressive and slightly rude is probably the only way they can get these kids off their backs. And I'm speaking as somebody who remembers who I was as a high school student, and boy was I obnoxious. So in my opinion, I think the bus driver's doing nothing wrong by having the radio on while they're driving their bus around. And I think the original poster had it right. They accommodated to their surroundings by getting headphones. And that really was a win-win situation for everyone involved. But that's just my opinion. What do you think in this situation? Do you think the original poster was being rude for asking them to turn down the radio? Or do you think the bus driver could have been a lot nicer to the original poster and just turned it down one notch? Leave a comment down below. We'd love to hear it. An entitled Karen doesn't watch her child at the pool and freaks out on me when I save him from falling in the pool. And I'm honestly just so sick of it. So my first job was at 16 years old, and it was a type of customer service job. I was a lifeguard at a very busy major indoor pool. Weirdly, it was very similar to the job of a front desk person in so many ways, dealing with the public, keeping people from doing stupid stupid things with a stupid smile plastered across my face. It was definitely exhausting. This one particular day, I was patrolling the shallow end of an Olympic-sized swimming pool. There was a very large, shallow hot tub type separate area of the pool with a bench seating area all around that sported lots of jets and so on. We used it to teach young children, so it was called the teach pool. And trust me, every single one of those kids would pee in that pool, or much worse if you know what I mean. But on Sunday, adults would come in with kids and family members for a public swim. Many of them would sit stewing in this filthy pool, and it honestly was just disgusting. But whatever, just toss in more chlorine, turn the filter to max, and hope that nobody gets cholera. So this one Sunday, with a pool full of well over 1,200 patrons, as we were encouraged to call them, and a teach pool with another 80 people, full staff of guards on duty, all of us just trying to make sure that all 1,200 heads resurfaced every 30 seconds or so, and nobody was left on the bottom of the pool at closing time. A truly impossible job, but we did our best. I was constantly scanning my zone and looked over at the teach pool. A tiny toddler was walking along the bench seating area. Two mommies, both presumably named Karen, were chatting with each other, and Mommy Karen had her back turned to little Johnny as he was wandering along the bench. I saw this one coming from a mile away and I headed over. I was almost there when a powerful jet blew Johnny's feet out from under him, and in a splash, he goes out to the middle of the teach pool, just a few inches over his head, and he's circling the central drain. It was almost funny in a way, if it wasn't just moments from being a horrible tragedy, but I was there in a flash, so I jumped in and pulled this kid out before the top of his head was even wet. I walked back up to Mommy Karen, tapped her on the shoulder, and said, is this your kid? She said, no, my little Johnny is right here, as she looks around back and forth. Then she freaks out, screams at me, and rips little Johnny out of my arms, scaring little Johnny and causing him to cry. After that, she runs to the changing rooms. Now, over my short career, this or something like this has happened at least 35 times before I stopped counting, and it just became routine. Most were simply pullouts like this one. Some were much more serious. In fact, some of them were full-on water rescues. Some were dealing with epileptic seizures or major fractures or suspected spinal injuries, people falling backwards off of a 10-meter tower, and so on and so on. But the one constant in all of these situations, I was never, not a single time ever thanked by anybody. That really sucks. This original poster literally saved this kid's life and probably prevented a really serious accident, all because his stupid mom was not paying attention. And how does she react? She freaks out and runs away, basically implying that this person had nefarious intentions, which is honestly insane. If anything, that entitled Karen and anybody who doesn't watch their kids the way that they should, 100% in my opinion, should be banned from that pool completely. They're clearly irresponsible and they should not be allowed to come back here, because that's just a liability waiting to happen. But I totally understand where this original poster is coming from. Customer service in all of its areas is a completely thankless job. You help people out, you do your job well, and people still treat you like garbage, and it really does suck. But you know what? At least you saved some lives doing this, and it sounds like you did this a lot. So good for you for being a good person and a good lifeguard, regardless of if these stupid Karens are gonna thank you or not. An entitled spoiled brat freaks out wanting a new toy on the toy aisle, but I step in and buy the last one in stock for quite a while, and I honestly could not be more satisfied, leaving the store with toy in hand, hearing that little goblin scream at the top of his lungs. Here's what happened. A few years ago, while working overseas for the military, I was doing some quick shopping at my base exchange. While standing in an aisle looking at some cleaning items, I began to hear in the distance the sound of what felt like a screaming bat or a goat hybrid that just proceeded to get louder and louder. I looked out of the aisle to possibly spot this cryptid, but just saw a screaming little boy being pushed in a shopping cart by his mom. People around them were looking annoyed as the kid was practically screeching at the top of his lungs over and over again, "I want it! I want the big gun! I want the big gun!" and pointing at the toy aisle a few rows down. While passing by me, I overheard the mom telling her son, "Not now, sweetie. Mommy has to get to the makeup counter. We'll pick it up on the way out." And honestly, this just rubbed me the wrong way. Not only was this mother okay with how her son was acting, but she was also going to reward him for it. I then got curious and decided to go to the toy aisle to see what this big gun was. I turned the corner and I immediately saw what he was talking about. And I'll give the kid credit. He has some good taste, because on the shelf was the biggest Nerf gun I've ever seen in my life. This thing was literally just a straight up up minigun. It's comparable to the one that the heavy weapons guy used in Team Fortress 2. After spending a few minutes admiring it and daydreaming about how I would have absolutely destroyed my friends in Nerf gun fights if I only had this monster in my arsenal, I then realized this Nerf gun was the last one on the shelf. I immediately grabbed it and then found a store employee to ask a few questions. I went up to them and I said, "Excuse me, can I ask a few questions about this toy real quick?" The employee happily obliged, and I said, "Is this the last one that you have? Like, is there any more in the back?" The employee says, "Well, let me check." They then leave to go to the back of the store for a few minutes and then returns to tell me the best news possible. The employee says, "Okay, yeah, that one that you're holding is the last one of that toy that we have. I also checked on our computer and there also doesn't seem to be any more in stock at our closest store or the one online. So if you want to get it, you better get it now. I also don't think we're going to be getting any other shipments anytime soon." When I heard this news, I looked at the employee and smiling like the Grinch when he got a wonderful, awful idea, I said thank you. I then immediately proceeded straight to checkout and bought this Nerf minigun. But the cherry on top was what happened after I bought my new toy. I went back into the store to make sure that the mini Banshee knew what I just bought. I found him still in the shopping cart next to the makeup counter with his mom talking to a salesperson. I casually walked by in front of the kid with a big Nerf gun under my arm, and what happened next was most definitely worth the price tag. The look of shock and fear just completely took over this kid's face as he starts to scream, as well as yank on his mom's sleeves and point at me. I just disappear into another aisle and proclaim that my job was now done. While leaving the store, they must have rushed back to the toy aisle because I again could hear the ear-piercing screeches of that little goblin coming from the toy aisle. He was screaming over and over again about how it's gone, crying at the top of his lungs. I usually don't like the sound of screeching children, but that might as well have been a live Aerosmith performance because that was just pure audible chocolate to me. And while leaving, I walked past the guy entering the store who could also hear this screaming kid with a very confused look on his face. He looks at me and says, "Good Lord, what on earth is that?" I look at him and I say, "It's most likely a mistake," and I honestly could not be happier. This original poster is absolutely my hero. They got back at this spoiled rotten kid and basically showed that no, you cannot get what you want sometimes. It's always fun to have adult money where you can do stuff like this and maybe just get a little bit of a dig at that spoiled kid in the toy aisle. So honestly, I'm on the original poster side here. I don't think they did anything wrong in the slightest. And if anything, they can probably give that to a kid who would most likely actually appreciate it, instead of that screaming spoiled child who clearly is rewarded for their bad behavior. My fiance doesn't earn enough money to help out around the house. And now, even though he's got a part-time job, he refuses to push for anything better than that. And it's honestly just so frustrating. So my fiance grew up in a relatively well-off household. He used to get money from his parents all the time. He's never really had to work very hard in his life, but now they're no longer able to support him. So instead, he's began to lean heavily on me. I am in no way career-minded. I grew up in poverty, and I have no familial support. And so I guess I'm just hardworking when I have to be, but I don't enjoy it as I struggle with being disabled. I'm financially comfortable, not wealthy, but I can pay my half of rent and bills. I treat us to trips and night outs, as well as gifts on special occasions. He doesn't ever do any of this for me, which so far has been okay because I thought it was a temporary situation. I don't like my job, and I find it stressful, but I can't just quit. If I do, I won't be able to take care of both of us. I didn't pursue any of my career goals, which would have temporarily plunged us into poverty, because we agreed supporting him in his career would work out for the best if we wanted to have a family. He was retraining for a career in tech. I was okay with this, but it did mean putting on hold making important plans for our future, like marriage, kids, or even owning our own home. Literally years out of my life, I was made to believe it was for the best for our future in the long run. He left his training early for personal reasons, which I completely understand. He's qualified enough to pursue the jobs he wanted. He took on a part-time cleaning job, which has turned out to be very cushy for him, as a lot of time he doesn't have to do anything and has no boss breathing down his neck. It's not enough to pay his way 50-50 or ever help us out in hard times, but he promised it was temporary until he gets the job in the industry that he wants. Something he said would be working on his free time. People are getting laid off left and right here at the moment, and I have no reason to believe that this job might not last as it is anyway. anyways. He told me today he's not going to pursue any other better paid work. He says he's happy working part-time at an easy job that doesn't challenge him and then just coming home and playing computer games. I said this isn't fair on me and it's just not sustainable. When I said it's unfair and stressful for me to bear the financial burden for the both of us, he suddenly became incredibly hostile. My job could go at any time as well. We have no security like this. I'm feeling the strain and I didn't sign up for this. We are otherwise happy and harmonious in our relationship. Aside from this particular situation, I love him, but I'm losing respect for him. I'm starting to feel like his mom instead of his fiance. I'm frightened for our future now and I honestly don't know what to do. So for some better context, the guy in this situation is 42 years old. So his entire adult life, he has mooched off of his parents and used them just so he could stay afloat and basically do whatever he wants to do. And it sounds like he's doing the exact same thing with you. He's basically using you for money and he is using your job as a way to stay afloat and basically just live a lazy life instead of being more career-minded and pushing for something more. And I think you have it right. This is just completely unfair for you. I would imagine if I was in your shoes, I would feel pretty burned out, as well as super frustrated that this man that you want to marry is suddenly acting like such a child. I mean, you can clearly see where his priorities are. He would rather go home after a part-time job that's super low stress and play video games than get out there and get a higher paying job so both of you can meet any of your goals. So maybe sitting down with him and reminding him of those goals that both of you have might go a really long way. It sounds like you don't own your own home, and it sounds like you really do want to make a life for yourself. And maybe explain that, hey, this is not going to get us the life that we want, and it's not fair to sit here and basically not be able to get exactly what you want, all because he is not putting in the effort to find that job that's in his field that can pay a lot more. So hopefully this works out for you, because what you're currently describing definitely sounds really frustrating, and you absolutely deserve a lot better. An entitled Karen refuses to turn off her stupid music, and even after we ask her nicely, she turns it around on us and claims that it's her right to play music whenever she wants and however she wants. And she was honestly so unbelievably annoying. So I was on a bus today and this lady and her son sat behind me. She was playing this gospel song for children on her phone or something like that and telling her son the story of Daniel from the Bible. She kept playing the same song again and again. During the fourth or fifth time, I turned around and said these exact words: "Ma'am, could you turn down the volume, please? Just turn it down a little bit, please." At this moment, the other passengers looked at me, and I'm pretty sure they were glad somebody finally said it. The woman refused and sounded very offended that I dared to ask her to turn it down. I reiterated that I was asking politely, and she repeated her reaction, still sounding offended. I swear this lady was acting like I went to her private home and asked her to stop listening to music. She then tried to claim that if it was profanity music, I wouldn't complain. But you know what? This lady doesn't know me. She doesn't know what I listen to. All she knows is that I asked her as kindly as I could to turn down the volume. I don't know if it was my age, my clothes, or even the color of my skin. But really, I bet this woman just assumes that if somebody complained about her kid's song, he must be into the devil's music or whatever it is. I thought about playing the most unholy rap song I thought of on my phone at maximum volume, but unlike her, I actually have respect for the other passengers on the bus. She ended up saying that if it bothered me, there were some seats I could take at the front of the bus. And I said, you know what? There is. So I got up and I just left. I then heard her arguing with this guy on the back of the bus, who I think was defending me in the moment. So shout out to this guy for keeping her busy so she wouldn't play that stupid song again. She then proceeded to say that her son was autistic and also had ADHD while talking much louder than the guy she was speaking with. She referred to playing her annoying song over and over again as a personal right, and once again said I wouldn't be complaining if it was profanity music, even though she doesn't know me. I'm glad we didn't leave at the same stop because I'm not sure if I could resist cussing her out, and I really prefer to not exchange any words with her ever again. Despite wanting to tell her, my reaction for any song repeated several times would be the same, and if I was listening to music, profanity or even Mozart-wise, either way, I'd have earplugs in, and I would not be bothering the people around me, but that wouldn't make a difference on her because she doesn't need arguments. She's aware she can get away with it because she honestly is just so entitled. I truly cannot stand people like this. They get on a public platform, whether it's a bus or an airplane or whatever whatever it is, and they play their music full blast. And I'm with the original poster. I don't care what it is. Put on headphones, put in earpods, do whatever you gotta do to make it a private experience. I am not interested in your stupid music, your podcast, or whatever it is. And the fact that this lady tried to profile the original poster and make some kind of assumption about them based on the way they look is truly disgusting. I mean, this guy could have easily just been into K-pop and had nothing to do with any kind of profanity music or whatever veiled, subtle message she was trying to get across, because it was clearly obvious she was trying to make some nefarious comment without getting caught in her words. So hopefully this guy never runs into this lady again, because she honestly sounds obnoxious, and entitled people like this clearly just will never get it. No matter how nice and polite you could possibly come across, they will always think they're in the right. I am struggling with my father's new partner, and I honestly just want her to stop treating me like a child. So I have just recently moved back home with my father due to an ex that caused me to lose my job. It's not ideal, and the move wrecked my savings, and my job market is not here. So I'm currently job hunting and expect to be moved out within 3 to 6 months, which is pretty reasonable for the most part. Otherwise, I had not lived at home since I was 18 years old. Mind you, now I'm 22. My mother and father separated this year, and my father has found an old but new flame. I've never met the woman since I moved in so recently, but he's constantly on the phone with her, so it's like she's here in spirit, and it's constant. They are also planning on combining households in about a year. This is fine, and while I'm not pleased with how fast things are moving, she is fine as a person. She has one fatal flaw though. She constantly treats me like a younger teenager, and it's resulted in my father also treating me younger, which is driving me up the wall. They keep making plans involving me without my input, especially her. This would be cute if it did not involve me doing things like living at home forever, or even sharing a room with her daughter, as well as spending literally every holiday with them. I usually juggle between my mom's house, my father's house, or just large family get-togethers. I'm the only one willing to see my mother, as my younger siblings blame her for frankly everything, and that stretches to literally almost every single bad thing. She also, in general, just doesn't want me to move out, and just wants me to be a part of her nuclear family forever. She buys me things that I have zero interest in, and while it's sweet, I genuinely think it's just a waste of money, and she calls me her kid. She also expects me to be at family dinners nightly in the future, and in general seems to view me as much younger than I am, with plans to live at home for much longer than I'd want or could possibly stand. This has also resulted in my father treating me like a baby when he's on calls with her, and this is something that I've noticed recently. Frankly, my father was an atrocious parent, mentally, physically, emotionally, so him treating me like I have the emotional maturity and mental capacity of a toddler is honestly not surprising, but she somehow makes it worse. It has started feeding into each other and is giving me a headache. I've repeatedly mentioned that I feel too old for a stepmother, and I don't think of her that way, but it's not computing with either of them. Likewise, the constant steamrolling of my wants, as well as my needs as an adult, is driving me nuts. For added measure, I suspect that I might be pregnant, and I am not looking forward to that level of extra smothering. I suspect moving will be my only fix to this circumstance, and this might be the only way that I can reestablish boundaries, but anything else would be nice in the meantime before I beat my boundaries into them with a rolling pin. What should I do? I think you said it best. I really think moving out is going to be the only way that you can possibly have any semblance of your adulthood back, because they see you moving back in and they only see that 18-year-old girl that lived in your father's house, and that's really unfortunate. You've grown up over these past few years. You are a different person overall, and they really do need to start respecting that. So it's unfortunate that they are treating you this way, and it's honestly just not fair. I mean, you have your own life. You probably have your own bills to pay and your own debts that you're trying to keep up on. And to make it even worse, not only is your dad previously incredibly abusive, but there's a chance that you might be pregnant as well, which is really not a good situation to be in, considering how weird your stepmother and your dad is acting. So hopefully you can move out of there sooner than later, because I honestly don't see this ever stopping unless you do get out from underneath their home. And then maybe once you're away from them, you can try to reestablish some boundaries, because for them to treat you like a kid is honestly just insulting, and they really should see you as an adult and someone who is trying to live their own life. Today I messed up by completely misunderstanding what Secret Santa really was all about, and I honestly feel completely dumb. So for a bit of context, I'm working in Europe, and I was raised in an Arabic country, so Christmas and everything else that comes comes with it is a complete foreign concept to me. Now, my colleagues are awesome, and I'm really enjoying working with them in the company. The only downside is that when they're extremely tired, their English tends to make less and less sense. We are a small team of 5, and my manager brought it up to me that she wants to do this thing where we will make a game and choose a name, then give that chosen name a gift. I remember I double-checked if I understood correctly. I said, oh, so the whole team is going to buy a gift to that person. Being this conversation took place on a late Friday afternoon, and her being so tired, she said, yeah, sure. I found the concept weird, but I thought maybe it's just like some cultural thing, so I said, yeah, sure, I'm in. We didn't really talk about it since, so today at work, they said they're going to finally play the game to find out who they're going to gift presents to. And I thought to myself, okay, this is cool. We're gonna find out who's that lucky person who's getting the expensive gift. They also said Secret Santa. I thought, wow, what a creative name for a weird game. So my manager brought a paper bag and the names were inside written on small pieces of paper. She asked us one by one to take out one name each. I thought since there were 5, for every name there are 5 pieces of paper, and the name that's picked the most will be nominated as the chosen Secret Santa, or whatever's actually happening here. I was rationalizing how this is going to end up, with one chosen individual to get the ultimate gift. One girl said she'll go first and that she was so excited, and I was like, what? Why does it matter? It's weird, but sure. This is all my inner dialogue, by the way. I didn't say this out loud. We all picked, and then it was my turn. They're hiding the papers and reading them in secret, and I'm thinking, what's with all the secrecy? I was the one before the last. I put my hand in the bag, and I noticed only 2 papers are left, and this was another moment where I just didn't understand what was happening. I say nothing, and I pick one of them out. It's Celine. She's my favorite colleague, and in my mind, I think that she definitely deserves it. My manager picks up the last one, and I thought it was time to vote. I get excited, and I wait for her to give us the mark. Instead, she asked us to put the papers back in the paper bag and to not forget who we picked. But I thought to myself, why not just put the papers on the table and see who got voted most? But whatever. At this point, I started to feel like I didn't understand the whole thing. We put the papers back in the bag, and then I asked probably the dumbest question without realizing it. I said to everyone, so who did you guys pick? I got Celine. They all collectively looked at me and said, no, you can't say who you got for Secret Santa. Now we have to do it again. I tell them that we're choosing one to give a gift to, right? And now we're supposed to be voting on it. And after I said that, they basically all looked at me incredibly confused. And then my idiot self finally gets it. The realization hit like a truck. It all clicked. I go, wait, so the person I got in my paper is a person I'm gifting, and someone else got my name, so they'll gift me. After one of my coworkers said yes in the most obvious way, I said, oh, now I get it. And at that point, they all just busted up laughing. And now I feel really dumb, as if I only have 2 brain cells left. That is honestly a really funny story, and it's also incredibly wholesome. I guess from the outside looking in, a Secret Santa really would be kinda weird unless you know what's going on. This is honestly just a really cute experience. And if anything, you made that Secret Santa way more memorable. So hopefully Celine enjoys whatever gift you give her, because you've already made this Secret Santa incredibly special. An entitled old man in Walmart hits me with his cart after I wasn't going fast enough in the line I was in, and I honestly could not be more upset. So 2 weeks ago, I was admitted to the ER after having a stroke, and I was finally discharged last Friday, only for my clumsy self to trip on a rug in the lobby on my way out after being discharged, falling directly on my face and banging up my knee pretty good. What luck, am I right? So now I'm back to using a walker since my leg is still hurting and I can't fully straighten it. The next day, my dad and I head to Walmart because we need to get something for his car, and I was looking for some multivitamins and nutritional shakes or whatever. We gather up what we need and head to the checkout line. We didn't have much, literally carrying things in our hands. Well, he was. I had my stuff in my walker, but it wasn't really much. 5 of our things in total combined. Surprisingly, the checkout line we were at wasn't as full as one would normally expect, and we were only 3rd in line before we were next. There's a few closed, and the furthest one away didn't have many people either, and the self-checkout lanes were basically empty. There was another cashier next to our lane, but was closed, as she was about to go on break, and that's when the entitled old man comes in. He comes around with a cart full of whatever and makes his way to the now closed cashier, to which she explains that she was bagging up her last customer, stating that the lane was closed. The old man grumbles and mumbles about the lines being too long, even though they weren't, and after looking around to see the other lanes, he decides to get behind me instead. Now, the cashier at our lane was busy making small talk with her coworker, not really paying attention to the customer, waiting for the transaction to finish, as they had swiped their card ready to pay. This entitled old man pipes up and he says, "Hope they're having a nice conversation," but not loud enough for the cashier to hear him. But no one really pays attention to him. He sighs loudly, then proceeds to step next to me and ask, "Hey, you mind letting me go ahead? I'm in a bit of a rush." Again, he has a full cart, whereas my dad and I only have 5 or so items. I respond by saying, "Sorry, but so are we, and we don't have a lot of stuff. We won't be long." This entitled old man decides that this isn't an acceptable answer and mumbles to himself some swear word as he steps back behind me. The cashier finally finishes with the customer up front. One more to go, and now my dad and I are second in line. As we slowly move forward, this entitled old man pushes his cart forward and hits the back of my legs, shouting, "Hey, move it already, hurry it up," as if it's somehow my fault it's taking too long. As mentioned before, I had fallen and I was still pretty hurt, so I let out a yelp, and my dad instantly spun around in a panic, as did the cashier and the customer in front of us. I turn and I glare at this old man, and his face is turning a shade of red with an angry scowl. My dad yells out, "Hey, what's your problem, man? What are you doing?" People notice what's going on and put 2 and 2 together. The cashier says, "Sir, if you can't calm down and wait and stop causing a disturbance, I'll call security and I'll have you escorted out." This finally puts the old man in his place, because he turns and shoves his cart to the side and steps out of line. He screeches, "You all are taking too long," and walks away instead, thinking that he's won, only for us to see him come back for his cart and get in a different and longer line as we are leaving the store, which honestly was just a huge waste of everyone's time. People at Walmart, man, they are just so unhinged. And it's so weird that this guy would act like this, especially when there's a guy in front of him who can barely walk, and there's clear indications right in front of him that this guy is injured and he has things going on. So hopefully they don't have to deal with this guy ever again, because he sounds unhinged as well as just a little bit crazy. An entitled crazy Karen freaks out on me and accuses me of reselling baby formula that I'm simply just trying to buy for my child. And when I try to get away, she follows me around the store, screaming at the top of her lungs that I'm stealing from her. Here's what happened. So first, a little backstory. My wife and I had our first child this year. It was a heck of a year for a child that needs to have formula too, by the way. We are always searching everywhere near us for formula every time that we start running low, and we will usually try to grab 2 of the largest containers we can get, making sure to keep within the store guidelines on how many they will let customers have. I do want to feed my kid, but I don't want to take from others who may need it also. So that way we can make sure we always have food for him, which leads me to the beginning of the week. We were searching again because our stores were running low and we would need more before the middle of the week. Searching for the specific formula that we needed was leading to us maybe having to take a trip out of state just so we could feed our son. We checked one more time through the Walmart app, and one of the locations thankfully in our town had the formula we needed. I rushed over to the store, hoping that they had not sold out. I got there and luckily they had it. I grabbed 2 and I called my wife to see if she wanted me to get more. They had 10 in total, and the store had a limit of 6. She told me to only get 2 because she didn't want others to do without. So I hung up with her and I put them into my cart. And that's when I heard the most shrill voice say, "What do you think you're doing?" I turn around and I see this entitled Karen who looks a little bit older than me. I could be wrong. I've always been kind of terrible at guessing someone's age. She says to give the formula to her because she needed it for her kid and I must just be reselling it. I looked at her and I nervously laughed a little and said, "No, I have a son and he needs the formula." She then just simply replied that she does not care at all and that her baby needs it more. I look at her and again I say, "No, I am taking this because my son needs it. There are literally 8 more on the shelf," while also pointing out that the limit is 6, so she can grab as many as she likes. But she is having none of it and starts pushing to my cart to take my son's food. I made sure to protect it and to move the cart in a way that she couldn't act like I was being aggressive and trying to hit her. I am a bigger man, and some would call me scary or intimidating because I have the kind of face face that can definitely be seen as scary looking. So I knew I had to be careful with this weird entitled Karen. This set her off as she started screaming that I was stealing from her and her child, stating that I wanted her child to starve because I was just reselling formula. I walked away before I would lose my cool, and she actually started following me through the store, trying to get people to force me to give her the formula that she needed so badly. She finally found a manager and started trying to keep me there. I simply said I am within the limit, and while she was focused on them, I booked it. She must have looked around because she couldn't find me, and she just started screaming like a mad person. While people were heading towards her, I calmly, but with a little bit faster of a pace, made my way to checkout and I paid. With my son's food, I got in my car and I laid low for a few seconds, not knowing if she had found me and was just actually following me. As I was pulling out of my spot in the rearview mirror, I saw her running out of the front door, looking wildly to see if I was still there. I pulled out of there while calling my wife to tell her all about this. And let me just tell you, my wife was seething with anger. All I have to say is thank God that this Walmart is on the opposite side of town. I do kind of feel bad because in the back of my mind, I have the thoughts of what if they really did need it. But you know what? I have to feed my son. That's my responsibility as a parent, and this lady can go get her own. What an absolute psychopath. She tries to hunt you down in the middle of Walmart, pretending like you stole some formula out of her basket. Like, is this lady just crazy or something? She literally could have just grabbed any of the other 8 ones that were on the counter. Like, what is wrong with this lady? I just don't understand why she flipped out. There is literally more formula on the shelf. She probably just wanted to try and grab all of it for herself and be that person that just takes everything. So honestly, to the original poster, don't feel bad for a second. There was literally no reason for her to act like that, and you know what? If I was in your shoes, I would have booked it away from her as well. And I bet you she was projecting exactly what she was gonna do. There's a part of me that thinks she was probably reselling it, which would probably explain why she was freaking out about you taking the formula. So good for you for getting out of there like freaking James Bond or something like that, because this lady is crazy, and hopefully you never run into her ever again. My boyfriend called me spoiled for expecting a birthday gift, and I honestly don't know what to do. I've been dating my boyfriend for over 9 months now. I celebrated my birthday a couple of days ago, and my boyfriend took me out to dinner and watched a movie to celebrate in advance, since he would be busy on my actual birthday. It was a lovely date, and I honestly really appreciated it. Just for some backstory, his birthday was a couple of months ago. I bought him gifts that I put so much thought and effort into, and I really wanted to get him something that I knew he would love. I also expressed to him through random conversations that I don't count food or abstract things as gifts from my significant other because I'm really sentimental as a person when it comes to objects. I love keeping things like movie tickets and even random leaves and things that have significant meaning to me. So I was starting to get the gut feeling that he didn't get me anything because days have passed since my birthday. So I jokingly brought up asking where my gift is, since he showed me a picture of a watch he just bought for himself as an early Christmas gift. When I brought it up, he said, "I don't know what to get you." And when he said that, I felt really sad because I felt like he didn't know me at all. Why does he need to ask me? I put so much thought and effort into his birthday gift. When I expressed to him that I felt bad when he said that, he blew up on me and said I was completely spoiled, and it's like I don't even see the things that he does for me. He said that our dinner date was my birthday gift, and it was too bad for me if I wanted more than that. He was just lashing out at me and blaming me for making it a big deal. How do I even begin to handle this situation? What should I do? Your boyfriend is being a complete jerk. It's really disappointing to see how he's acting towards your birthday. I mean, you put so much thought into the gift you gave him. I think it's then completely normal to expect something in return from him, and you've made it known to him exactly how you feel. Food and abstract things such as gifts just don't mean as much to you as getting something from the heart. And yeah, that's probably a little bit trickier to shop for, or even coming up for ideas that you might enjoy in general, but that's no excuse not to try. So honestly, the way your boyfriend is acting is completely out of line. And if I was in your shoes, I would definitely have a conversation with him, not with the expectation that you want to get a gift or anything like that. I feel like that stage is past and you're probably just not going to get anything, but more so that you can explain yourself and say, hey, this really hurt my feelings. So if you do decide to do that, hopefully it goes well, because your boyfriend's reaction to you asking about a gift is completely out of line, and I honestly don't think you're spoiled in the slightest for expecting some kind of gift on your birthday. And An entitled Karen wreaks havoc at a hotel, causing disruptions and making up lies about my fellow coworkers. But after hearing all the constant lies, I simply had enough. So I put her in her place in a really fantastic way. And now as a result, she's choosing to represent herself in a court of law as she tries to sue the hotel. Here's what happened. Since I started as a front desk agent at a 3-star business hotel earlier this past summer, there has been this elderly woman who has slowly but surely descended into complete delusional and harassing behavior. The first story I ever heard of was in our shift notes. She was complaining to one of my coworkers that it was dangerous to have foreigners in the hotel because they apparently to her carry a disease. She later told me that a technical issue with her TV was probably the Chinese. Ridiculous stuff like that. She also said people of color staying at this hotel have complained about her for inching away from them or generally breaking social norms. She also told a black police academy student that she doesn't support his profession while also backing away from him slowly, which put me in a super great position between validating this guest's perspective that this was a skin color thing while trying not to gossip about other guests. But in retrospect, I should have validated him completely without referencing her other actions, which is a lesson learned for me. Months go by and every week, this guest requests her folio printed out and sent to her, which is normal, but the way she did it was very rude. She said,
"Can I have my folio, even though your manager overprices the market items?"
or something like that with a little guffaw to flourish the interaction with passive aggression. Fast forward a couple of months, and she started saying that we're trying to harm her, and that we're being violent, that the engineers threw corrosive acid on her fridge, and that her doctor said she has an infection caused by the chemicals used to clean her carpet. We didn't even use chemicals. It was just warm and maybe soapy water. And then she turned around and said we ought to be cleaning her carpet properly. So she lies routinely about us, trying to poison her. She also called the desk one night, sounding like she was choking. The person at the front desk that night called 911 because it sounded like the guest couldn't breathe. The front desk went back on the line with the guest, who was suddenly perfectly fine, and said that she just choked on her coffee. When the front desk told her that emergency services were on the way, she said,
"Oh, let them come,"
and then kept them for upwards of 30 minutes to tell them about the trials and tribulations she faces at our property. She's made one of our night shift workers sob because she threatened to send the worker by the name of Sarah to jail. She has no power to do this, obviously, and Sarah did nothing illegal, but this worker is very, very sensitive and has apparently been falsely accused and consequently faced jail time in the past. So the whole thing was very traumatizing to her. The nightmare guest follows her around during her night shift and films her doing her night shift duties to document her supposed illegal activities. But you know what? I don't think cleaning the pool area is a crime, but whatever. The morning I came in to see Sarah sobbing in the office of this woman's abuse was one of glorious catharsis in the end. The nightmare guest came to the desk while Sarah was still there at the adjacent desk. She asked me to print all 48 of her folios or something like that. I was cold and civil, as I always have been with her. She started talking to me about Sarah's illegal behavior and the false accusations and some other delusional garbage. Sarah is a very petite, high-pitched voiced woman that says sorry way too much, and I was naturally feeling very protective. Our exchange went as follows. I told her not to talk to me about Sarah and that I wasn't interested in what she had to say. She got all huffy and says,
"I am a paying customer,"
as if that means I have to do whatever she wants and be told lies and a bunch of information I couldn't even do anything about, even if it was true. I snap back and I say, "Actually, you're a nightmare." She then gets all angry and shaky in the way that only senior citizens can and says she won't be spoken to in this disrespectful tone, to which I respond, "Oh yeah? How's it feel, lady?" This whole time I kept my voice down to avoid disturbing guests in the breakfast area, which ended up being absolutely pointless. Sarah then starts yelling at this guest for trying to intimidate her, as well as threatening her freedom. I put my hands gently on Sarah's shoulder and very gently pushed her towards the back office and shut the door in an effort to try and de-escalate the situation. Another coworker actually called the police, which seemed extra but whatever, who ended up taking statements from the guest and my manager. All of this happened before 8 o'clock in the morning. We tried to kick her out, but in our region, any guest inhabiting any accommodation for upwards of 30 days have tenant rights. So a formal eviction was filed. She somehow convinced the judge that this should go go to a jury trial. There was a hearing about this, and she has been scheduled for a full jury trial. Months from now, she is literally like a stubborn Victorian ghost. She walks the halls all night, and her moods are so erratic. It's really sad, honestly, but mostly just pathetic and annoying. She hates us. She hates the property. She feels harassed and unsafe, and accuses everyone that talks back to her of violence, even if all we do is tell her to leave us alone and stop repeating all these details of fictional events that most of us have no control over anyways. And yet she still won't leave. She is also literally representing herself in trial, which I can't believe is also going to be supported by taxpayer dollars purely by existing. She has also sued multiple major hotels for conspiracy to harm, overcharging, as well as lots of other things. And she has been dismissed every time in the end. She is nothing but a con artist, and I honestly can't wait to see her fail again. Let me just put it this way. If they were selling tickets to this trial, I'd be the first one in line. This lady sounds absolutely crazy, and you are absolutely right. Not only is this going to get dismissed, but if it does go to trial by some miracle, all this mounting evidence against her for being blatantly racist, as well as a menace to the employees that work there, as well as the other guests that occupy the hotel, all of this will just come crashing down on her. So hopefully she gets banned from this place for good, and you guys never have to deal with her again, because actions like this absolutely deserve to have consequences. And just because she's some old woman doesn't mean that she should get away with this. My partner is constantly giving me such a terrible attitude and accusing me of things that I've never done in the first place, and I honestly don't know what to do. So I've been with my partner for 8 years now. I think overall we have a very healthy relationship. We generally have good communication and good conflict resolution, even after fighting. We're able to share concerns and feedback in a mature way. That being said, he's been dealing with amplified anxiety for the past 2 years, and it's resulting in some new behavior that I'm struggling to effectively address. He wakes up many days in a pretty bad mood, dreading the workday, and can be very unpleasant. I do my best to give him space to wake up and get ready for his day. However, recently he's been approaching me in the morning with complaints as well as things that he's upset about, and doing it in a very negative way and speaking to me in an unacceptable manner. Sometimes these complaints are related to me, and sometimes they're not. For example, this morning he was trying to implement an IT update that he couldn't figure out. After a lot of complaining, he asked for my help, and I said I'd try my best, but this isn't my strongest area. He stormed out of the room saying, "Fine, don't help me." I calmly followed him and restated that I'm happy to look. I just want him to know that I'm not confident that I'll be able to figure it out. I feel the need to set this expectation to limit his future frustration. While showing me what he was looking at, he was talking to me in an extremely rude way. Just a really terrible attitude, very short and snippy, and even raised his voice. This came out of nowhere, so I let it go for a few minutes. At one point, he made a comment about hating IT, and I reinforced his opinion by saying, "Yeah, this stuff is usually so frustrating." He started talking again with such an extreme attitude that I had to stop him and tell him not to talk to me like that. I know he is frustrated, but he cannot take it out on me. He then started accusing me of being the one with an attitude and being upset. When I questioned why he thought those things, he couldn't give me an answer, and then accused me of thinking he's stupid and giving him an attitude earlier that morning that he was still mad about. I feel like that is a ridiculous example, but some variation happens almost every other morning, and it's really stressing me out a lot. He approaches me in a way that he normally does not, and then completely refuses to acknowledge that he's doing it, flipping it on me 100% of the time, saying stuff like, "I'm not doing that, you are." He does it so often now that I pay very close attention to how I'm responding when he talks to me in this way. He will even go as far as to accuse me of rolling my eyes, raising my voice, or stuff along those lines, even though I absolutely am not doing that. I am by no means perfect, but I'm very relaxed and happy in the morning. I am confident that I'm not instigating any of these situations. Most of the time, I don't acknowledge his behavior in the moment at all. I give calm, short answers to what he says. We've had some productive conversations about this pattern, so it is lessening a little in frequency, but I feel like the intensity is rising. I know he's dealing with external stress, but this is not how he typically treats me. He usually reflects on it afterwards and recognizes he was at least part of the problem, but he continues to do it. It's very hard to deal with in the moment because it feels like he's creating his own narrative to justify his own behavior. behavior. Most of the time, I can just ignore it, but when he says things that are so clearly made up, it's hard not to take the bait, and I honestly don't know what to do. This is really unfortunate, because based on what you've described, your partner really is being very toxic, and it really does sound like therapy of some kind might be really useful in helping him sort this out. There really is so much you can do in this situation. You've had a discussion about it, he even admits that he goes too far sometimes, and yet still he does it all over again. So it honestly overall is just really unfair for you. So hopefully all of this works out and you're able to find some kind of solution to this, because you honestly should not be talked to like this, and he really does need to straighten out his attitude. An entitled Karen tries to get me fired because her Thanksgiving turkey isn't available right then and there, claiming that I told her the wrong date and that I had forced her to order the turkey in the first place. But thankfully my coworker had my back and put this entitled Karen in her place. Here's what happened. So I work at a grocery store that prioritizes older people with health problems, immunocompromised people, and people with special diets. As Thanksgiving began to roll around, we opened a program for our customers that would allow them to pre-order their Thanksgiving turkey. Because the program sounded a bit confusing on the outside, and a lot of customers don't read the posters to pre-order right in front of their face, we were trained to ask every person checking out if they wanted to pre-order and explain the program to them if they said okay. There was even a reward for the cashier that got the most people to pre-order, but to be honest, I wasn't too interested in the reward. Like every special event in the store, I ask if they're interested because I'm required to, and if they say no, I say okay and I hand them their receipt. Close to Thanksgiving, the pattern became muscle memory. I welcome them to my register, I ask if they're a member with us, ask if they want to pre-order their turkey, and hand them their receipt. Because of how many people I see a day, I tend not to remember anyone's face or information, nor do I care to remember something that's not for me to know. So this happened out of the blue, and I was utterly confused at first. Flash to the past, and I'm checking out an older woman who hands me a jug of orange juice. She asked me if we had more in the back because the shelves were empty. I didn't know for a fact if we did because I spent my entire day at the registers, but I knew we didn't get a new shipment until tomorrow, so most likely everything was on the shelves already, and only overflow products were in the back at this point. I told her that we could do a personal order for a case, and she filed out the order form. The thing about order forms in my store is that they can easily be misplaced. Because we're understaffed and the registers can't be unattended, I wasn't allowed to walk the form to the receiving room, but I knew at the end of every day, the registers were cleaned and anything that didn't belong there, such as product returns, things that need to go back on the shelves because someone didn't want them after all, garbage or damaged items, stuff like that, they were all taken to their proper locations. So I slipped the order form on top of the register drawer so it wouldn't be missed when they were cleaned. This will be important later. After we finished with the order, I asked if she wanted to order a turkey and she agreed, so I pulled up the pre-order list and had her fill out her information. I repeated back the pattern I had by now, so I said to her, the turkeys will come in the last 2 weeks of November. We won't call you because there are too many people on the list, but just come in when they arrive and bring your receipt with you. It's okay if you lose it though, because your name is now in the order book, so we can look it up and see what turkey size you got. I repeated this so many times, it was literally impossible for me to have said anything different. After finishing up, I moved on. For that order sheet, I was told a journey that it went on from a fellow coworker. After he cleaned the registers that night, he found the order and went to bring it to the manager's office. The office was locked, so he left it on the cabinet directly next to the office, so it would be found. It was found, and the manager decided to let receiving order the product, so he brought it to the back room and left it on the desk. Unfortunately, the receiving manager had taken a day off and didn't see the form at all. By the time anyone was able to order it, the new shipment had already come in with the product anyway. The only difference was we didn't call her to let her know it was in, because technically it wasn't her request, because the special order was never filled out. This whole incident began the nightmare that was a random woman trying to get me fired. The most insane part though was it happened in 15 minutes while I was on break, and my coworker had to fill me in when I returned. It was the 12th of November this year, and a woman walked into the store. She asked about her order and got a confused look. My coworker said no order was filled out, and she quickly flipped out, saying she filled out the form, and if I didn't give it to someone, it was obviously my fault, and she wanted me fired, or at least severely in trouble. She said I had terrible customer service, and so my coworkers asked me who she meant, because up to this point, she never even said my name, let alone what I looked like. Sadly, she didn't even remember me, which I found a little amusing because I was the only person in the store with vibrant blue hair. My coworker sent someone in the back to check on the product, and surprise, we had the item she ordered anyway, which calmed her down a little, but she still wanted to file a complaint against me for not filling out the order apparently. My coworker refused to do this because for one, he was one of the store managers and I was his apprentice, and two, he knew I didn't mess up anything because he was the one that took the form to the cabinet for the main manager. He finally managed to get her to let the incident go when someone else brought up the case of juice only for her to ask about the turkey. My coworker told her that they hadn't arrived yet, to which she insisted they were because apparently I told her they would be in today. Utterly confused, he looks at her receipt because nobody knew the exact day they were coming in, but being the 12th, it was too early for any turkey yet. Nobody was saying an exact date at checkout because nobody knew the exact date, not even the manager of the company. The turkey arrivals were dependent on the company that was supplying the turkeys. When she said that I had told her a date, that caused complete bafflement, and then he sees the problem. The woman ordered a 12 to 15 pound turkey, and she assumed 12 to 15 was the date of the turkey arrival. My coworker told her that 12 to 15 was the weight, not the date, and she just doubled down, claiming that I told her the date of when it's coming in, and that I needed to get in trouble for telling false information. And also, apparently, I was super pushy about making her order a turkey, and that she was forced to do it. He asked if she wanted a refund for her pre-order deposit, but she didn't want one. She just wanted her turkey and asked if she could have it anyway, which is a big old resounding no. Even if he wanted to give her the turkey, it physically wasn't in the store yet. Her turkey was still at the farm and alive. What does she want us to do about it? Well, this entitled Karen's only solution was to have me fired. It all came back to my fault, and I had to be punished for everything happening to her right now. If she couldn't have the turkey, I couldn't have my job. I'm not quite sure what happened after that. My coworker walked into the break room after the whole situation as I was just about to get up, and he told me to sit down for a minute because of this lady basically having it out for me. We hung out in the break room for a few minutes while he told me what happened. Then he went to go check on her. After he confirmed that she left, he said it was fine for me to go back to my post, and we never spoke of it again. Once the turkeys rolled in and people began to pick them up, the order list was marked off, and I sometimes read through it just to see how many more people needed their turkey still. Before Thanksgiving Day, everyone had gotten their turkey, so she obviously got her turkey eventually, and she never raised another complaint. But I'm pretty sure she was just having a bad day and trying to find someone to blame or something like that. But still, a ridiculous situation that I was happy to be in the break room for. What a weird entitled Karen. I think the original poster is right. They were clearly having a bad day and they decided, you know what? The person who helped me ordered it? Yeah, they're the person. I'm gonna blame them. I mean, what a ridiculous, horrible person. Using someone as a scapegoat in this way is just absolutely unacceptable because this coworker is literally just trying to make it through the holidays. And worst of all, they gotta deal with weird entitled Karens like this. So hopefully that lady never comes back into that store because people like that are just obnoxious and they honestly just make everybody else around them absolutely miserable. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. I'm considering going no contact with my mother because she has spent my entire lifetime being absolutely horrible to me, but I'm afraid of her reaction and I honestly don't know what to do. My mom has never ever been a good parent. It's taken a long time for me to understand that I was and have been abused emotionally and psychologically by her. The biggest issue is that she had zero concept of how much snooping violated my boundaries and autonomy. For as long as I can remember, she has believed that if I had something private that I wanted to keep to myself, I was keeping a secret that was obviously hers to know. This even got to the point, when she still had custody of my sister and I, that I would carry my school bag into the bathroom with me when I took a shower so she couldn't go through it while I was bathing. She read my journals through childhood. I lived full-time with my dad and stepmom until I was kicked out for failing out of college. And then I moved back in with my mom. We lived separately for a while, and I wrongfully assumed that she had a handle on her mental health and would treat me as an adult. But I was wrong. Eventually, I moved back in with my dad and stepmom. I was there for my mom as she battled breast cancer. I was there for her as she went through her several mental breakdowns and ended up in a psych ward multiple times over the years. I sat and let one of her friends, who I assumed was my friend as well, berate me about how I was a bad daughter because I lived away from her. During all of this, my mom moved to North Carolina to be with family friends. At At the time, I was having issues with my dad, and once again thought that the time and distance between us had meant that my mom had progressed somewhat in how she would treat me. And once again, I was proven wrong. I moved away from my dad and stepmom, my younger brother, and my younger sister to go to North Carolina and live in the same apartment building as my mother. As you can probably guess, it was more of the same. I was a 25-year-old adult, and she used her emergency key to repeatedly violate my boundaries and my privacy by going into my home, going through my things, telling me that I was a bad person because I had secrets. All the while, she kept reading my journal and was constantly going through my trash to catch me in my supposed lies. Every time she did this, I would confront her, and she would do the classic Darvo maneuver. I didn't do it, but if I did, it was your fault for being a private person, and you're being a bad person by trying to tell me who your father cheated on, that my trust issues are harming you. She treated me emotionally as if I was her spouse. That was her biggest gotcha. Her going through my things, repeatedly proving she couldn't respect my boundaries, was all my dad's fault. Eventually, I put my foot down. I took her emergency key, and I stopped talking to her, even though we lived in the same building in different apartments. I was able to find an amazing partner who I love and is going to marry me. My mother knows nothing about her because word would get out and my dad would cut me off from my brother. Right now, I'm living with my partner, having moved in together in July. We're about 5 hours away from my mom and half a continent away from my dad. I don't reach out and contact either of them anymore, and I only answer text messages and calls that they make. My mom told me, if you don't come back and visit me, I'm going to come visit you whether you like it or not. I had been planning to go visit after the holidays for a few days just to placate her, but you know what? I've decided I'm not going to. After struggling a lot with religion and its role in my life and upbringing, I have fallen away from traditional Christian faiths. I've been doing some surface level research in other areas of my life, trying to find my own path. And today, I woke up early and I couldn't go back to sleep, and I spent most of the morning refreshing several websites that talk about other people's experiences with their terrible parents. And now I can safely conclude that seeing all these other experiences and seeing how absolutely delusional these other parents are, I now need to fully cut my mother out of my life. I do worry about what she will say to other people if she finds out about how her daughter is living in sin with a partner of the same sex. She's going to use other people to attack me for that. But as I'm writing this, I think I've decided I'm done dealing with her. I want no more empty apologies for things I know she'll do again as soon as my back turns. I want no more refusal to acknowledge the way she was abusive to me and my sister when we were children. And I want no more feelings like my relationship with her is vital. I'm not really sure how to end this, but my partner supports me 100%, and her family has accepted me without question, which honestly is way more than mine can ever say. This is a really sad situation because your mom is an absolute piece of garbage. She has been manipulative for most of your life, and she would rifle through your things constantly, digging through your journals and your trash at one point. I mean, that is a massive breach of privacy, and it's obviously something you were hoping you wouldn't have to deal with when you decided to move next to her or with her in some cases. So I'm sure that's honestly really heartbreaking. You were obviously optimistic about her mental health, hoping that maybe she can have her stuff together and be more mentally sound moving forward. But she just proves time and time again that that is just not the case. And if anything, she's just choosing not to change in a lot of ways. And in your case, that's just so unfair because it seems like you're very empathetic towards her situation, and you obviously want to be there for her and be supportive of your mom because you know what? It's your mom. There's obviously some kind of automatic thought there that says, hey, I gotta protect and help her, right? So it really sucks because I think you can agree that your mom is really not a good person in this situation. So is your dad too, by the way. I mean, overall, you and your siblings have definitely gone through it, and that's not fair for you in the slightest. And it's not like you haven't made attempts to try and be there for your mom when she needs you. But you know what? She has betrayed your trust over and over again. So honestly, if I was in your shoes and I dealt with this much animosity, I probably would cut off my parents as well. You don't have to live your life like that. You've made the effort to try and reach out to your mom, but she's being an absolute jerk about it, and she's being incredibly bad to you and your siblings. So hopefully this is a step in the right direction for you. And I honestly don't blame you for giving yourself some distance and choosing to move on with your life. Today I messed up by telling a waitress that I had already beaten their hot wing challenge once before, and boy do I regret it. So as the title suggests, I like spicy things. I have a large collection of hot sauces at home, and I have tried most of the world's super hot peppers, and I've won numerous hot wing challenges challenges. Usually I'm fine, but as I've aged, occasionally I find my stomach suffers. Nothing too extreme, but a lot of noise and sometimes a bit of a ring of fire. Cut to today of this specific incident. I live in a medium-sized city in Canada. My brother-in-law used to live in another city about 90 miles away, so for context, about an hour and a half by car. This day in particular, we went to visit so we could drive him back to our house for the weekend. Now, we did this pretty often. Usually when we do, we find a restaurant to grab a bite to eat before we head home. The last few times we went, we found a small pub that specialized in buffalo wings. At the back of the menu, they advertised a hot wing challenge, where if you finish their hottest wings, you get to eat for free. Without an ounce of hesitation, I ordered the challenge wings. The waitress asked me, are you sure? To which I replied, I like hot foods, and I can't turn down an opportunity to eat free wings. She laughed and got me my wings. Now, the wings were hot, but I had definitely eaten hotter, and so I got my free wings. I paid for my girlfriend's meal, as well as my beer, and we went on our way. In the coming months, I did this twice more, and each time the waitress would ask me the same thing, are you sure? And each time I would say yes, and every time I would get free wings by the end of the night. It was wonderful. Cut to this last time. We go to our favorite wing place. We waltz in there like we own the place, and we seat ourselves. The waitress, whom I later find out is the owner, comes to take our order. My girlfriend, daughters, and brother-in-law all order, and the waitress turns to me and asks what I will be having. I say, I'd like to do the hot wing challenge, please. The waitress once again asked me, are you sure? And this is where I messed up. I stupidly told her, oh yeah, I've done this lots of times. Dear reader, when you tell the owner of the establishment that you've already eaten a free meal at their place, and now you're just there to fleece them out of another order of wings, they do not take it well. Our previously friendly waitress turns to me and coldly says, oh, have you now? Then this should be easy for you. And you know what? It was not. My wings came and everyone's eyes went wide, and they leaned away from my meal. Instantly, everyone's eyes were watering, and the waitress just smiles with a big toothy grin. She says, enjoy, and just walks away. I cannot convey to you, in mere words, the pain I suffered eating those wings. I took my first bite and it was searing doom. An explosion of nuclear fire blanketed my palate, not unlike what I'm sure the people of Pompeii would have experienced during the eruption of that volcano. My body began shivering and sweating. A river of snot and tears ran from my face. I went to the washroom twice, just to cry to myself and question my life choices. But even though no one expected me to finish my meal, I endured. When it was finally over, everyone was silent. We paid without a word and we just left. In the car, my girlfriend asked me, are you okay? When I just nodded in affirmation, she asked, are you sure? And I just looked at her without any expression on my face. We then started our drive home. Again, I would like to reiterate that generally, I don't experience much in the way of after effects from spicy foods. This time, it was completely different. I could literally feel the burn in my esophagus still, right down to my stomach, and my stomach was getting much worse. I was getting bloated and incredibly uncomfortable. About a half hour into this hour-and-a-half drive, I am becoming increasingly uncomfortable, to the point where I'm shifting uncomfortably in the driver's seat. My girlfriend again asks me if I'm okay, and I tell her something is off. She suggested that we stop to use the bathroom, which I declined. I wasn't sure what was going to happen, and I felt like I would rather be at home instead of some filthy gas station when things go down, if you know what I mean. An hour into the drive, and this discomfort is full on pain. Really, really bad pain. So I step on the gas. I'm blowing well past the speed limit. I didn't care. I just needed to get home. My stomach had decided that it was no longer going to house those abominations, and one way or the other, they were coming out. When we finally got there, I put the car in park and ran to the front door. I fumbled desperately with my keys, while everyone else got out of the car. The door finally opened and I vaulted up the stairs 4 at a time, while simultaneously undoing my pants. I raced to the toilet, but I was losing this battle. Just as I got to the bathroom, it happened. I got the door mostly closed before it all went down, leaving an unholy mess pretty much everywhere you would expect. At this point, I launched myself into the bathtub and started doing my best to get my clothes off. All the while, I'm violently expelling everything in my body, from both ends, mind you, if you know what I mean. My girlfriend, God love her, came upstairs and with an absolute look of disgust at my vile body expulsions, took my dirty dirty clothes away and clean the door, the walls, and the floor. She came back upstairs after starting the laundry and turned the shower onto my battered, burning body. I was cowering in the fetal position as the warm water hit me, still amazed at the lashback a pound of spicy buffalo wings was able to put forth. She asked me in a sweet voice if I had learned my lesson, and I feebly replied, yes. But you know what? I lied, because this would not be the last time that I would eat some spicy wings and absolutely regret it later. I don't know about you, but I cannot handle anything spicy. So the fact that this original poster literally went to Pompeii and back and still came out the other side alive and kicking is amazing to me. But this definitely is a mess up. He had a fantastic deal going where he was getting free buffalo wings, and he practically ruined that in one shot by bragging to the waitress who just so happened to be the owner. So hopefully the next time he finds a new place to get some free wings, he doesn't spill the beans that he's beaten their challenge before. Otherwise, I'm sure this incident will only repeat itself once again. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist at the top of the description. And if you want some chill music to put on in the background, check out easymode.com. If you like Am I the Jerk, subscribe to Am I the Genius. Everything will be linked down below in the description.